Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're diving into something absolutely insane. What if Deku had Sanji's powers instead of One for All? Sanji's abilities are absolutely broken superhuman leg strength that kicks through steel, fire-enhanced attacks without any devil fruit, insane speed and mobility, plus supernatural cooking skills. This dude literally breaks bones through hacky defense and his food can heal people. So we took this broken power set and dropped it into MHA with Izuku. Picture fire-kicking chef hero Deku building communities through combat and cooking, navigating his chivalrous code in a world full of female heroes. Every major arc gets completely reimagined as Deku becomes the symbol of nourishment instead of inheriting All Might's power. If this sounds epic, smash like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Let's dive in. The smell of burning concrete filled the playground as 4-year-old Izuku Midoriya slowly opened his eyes, his small leg still smoking from residual heat. Around him, scattered bricks and debris told the story of what had just happened, though Izuku himself could barely believe it. Kaken's friend, he went through the wall, Izuku whispered, staring at the human-shaped hole in the school's exterior brick wall. On the other side, he could hear crying and adults shouting. It had started like any other day at the playground. Kaken and his friends were picking on Mei, a quiet girl from their class who always brought elaborate lunches her grandmother made. They'd knocked her bento box to the ground, scattering perfectly arranged vegetables and rice across the dirt. "What a waste," one of Kaken's friends had sneered, crushing an onigiri under his foot. "Bet it tastes as weird as she looks." Something inside Izuku had snapped, not the familiar surge of wanting to help, but something deeper, hotter. The sight of food being carelessly destroyed, of Mei crying as her grandmother's love was trampled, ignited a fire in his chest that traveled down to his legs. Don't waste food, the kick had been instinctive. His right leg had burst into orange flames as it connected with the bully's stomach, launching him clean through the wall with a sound like thunder. Now, as teachers rushed past him toward the hole, Izuku looked down at his leg. The flames had faded, but his sneaker was completely burned away, leaving his small foot bare against the cool ground. Strangely, his skin was completely unharmed. Midoriya, their teacher, Miss Hayashi, knelt beside him, her face pale. "What happened? Are you hurt?" I think I got my quirk," Izuku said quietly, wiggling his toes. They felt different, stronger, like they contained tiny furnaces waiting to ignite. Behind Miss Hayashi, he could see Kaken staring at him with wide eyes, his usual confident smirk replaced by something Izuku had never seen before: wariness. "My leg got hot when I saw them waste Mei's food," Izuku continued, looking up at his teacher. "Is Tanaka-kun okay?" Miss Hayashi glanced toward the wall where paramedics were already tending to the boy who'd been launched through it. "He'll be fine, just some bruises and a big scare." "But Izuku," she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We need to call your mother." 2 weeks later, Izuku sat in Dr. Yujiko's office, swinging his legs nervously as the doctor reviewed his test results. His mother, Inko, clutched his hand tightly, her own palms damp with worry. "Well, young Midoriya," Dr. Yujiko said, adjusting his glasses as he looked at the paperwork. "Your quirk is quite fascinating. We've tentatively classified it as blazing cuisine, a combination of enhanced lower body strength, pyrokinetic abilities localized to your limbs, and some interesting neurological enhancements related to culinary arts." "Culinary arts?" Inko asked, confused. "Yes, the scans show unusual development in the areas of the brain associated with taste, smell, and fine motor control. I suspect young Izuku here will find himself naturally gifted in cooking and food preparation. It's quite rare for a quirk to have such diverse applications." Izuku perked up. "You mean I can cook, really cook?" "More than that," Dr. Yujiko smiled. "Your enhanced senses will allow you to detect ingredients, measure by instinct, and understand flavor combinations in ways that would take professional chefs years to develop. It's as if your quirk is designed around the philosophy of nourishment, both through combat and cuisine." "But doctor," Inko's voice trembled, what about the incident at school? He could have seriously hurt that boy." Dr. Yujiko's expression grew more serious. "Yes, about that. Izuku, I need you to listen carefully. Your quirk seems to come with some very specific compulsions. Can you tell me what you were feeling right before you kicked that boy?" Izuku thought back to that moment, remembering the hot anger that had filled him. I was mad about the food. It wasn't fair to waste something someone worked so hard to make, and he was being mean to Mei because she's a girl. That felt really, really wrong. Interesting, the doctor murmured, making notes. Mrs. Midoriya, I believe your son's quirk comes with what we might call moral imperatives, built-in compulsions that will likely influence his behavior throughout his life. He'll probably find it very difficult, perhaps impossible, to harm women or to waste food. These aren't weaknesses, they're part of what makes his quirk unique. Inko looked worried. But what kind of hero can't fight half the population? The kind that finds better ways to win, Dr. Yujiko replied. Some of history's greatest heroes succeeded not because they were the strongest, but because they were the most creative. 6 months after his quirk manifested, Izuku discovered Savor, a tiny restaurant tucked between a convenience store and a laundromat in a quiet part of Musutafu. He'd been wandering the streets after another difficult day at school. Kaken had started calling him Kitchen Fire instead of Deku, which was somehow both better and worse when the smell hit him. It was like nothing he'd ever experienced, layers upon layers of scent that his enhanced senses could pick apart and analyze. Roasted garlic, slow-simmered tomatoes, fresh basil, something smoky and rich that made his mouth water instantly. Following his nose, he found himself pressed against the window of the small restaurant, watching an elderly man work behind the counter. The man moved with precision and grace, his hands dancing over ingredients with the same fluid motions Izuku had seen in hero combat videos. You going to stand out there all day, kid, or are you going to come in? Startled, Izuku looked up to see the man watching him through the window. He was probably in his 60s, with silver hair tied back in a small ponytail and laugh lines around his eyes. What caught Izuku's attention, though, was the man's left leg, or rather, the advanced prosthetic that had replaced it from the knee down. The bell chimed as Izuku pushed open the door, suddenly shy. Sorry, sir, I didn't mean to bother you. It's just, it smells amazing in here. Does it now? The man smiled, wiping his hands on his apron. You've got a good nose, kid. Name's Genzo Sato, though most folks just call me Chef. What's your name? Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. Well, Izuku Midoriya, you hungry? I was just testing a new recipe and I could use an honest opinion. Before Izuku could protest, Chef Sato had placed a small bowl in front of him. The pasta was perfectly al dente, coated in a sauce that somehow managed to be both simple and complex. The first bite made Izuku's eyes water, not from heat, but from the pure emotional impact of the flavors. This is incredible, Izuku whispered. Chef Sato studied him carefully. You don't just taste it, do you? You understand it, every ingredient, every technique. It wasn't a question. Izuku nodded, suddenly embarrassed. My quirk makes me different with food, I mean. Different how? I can taste things other people can't, smell them too, and I know when food is made with care versus when it's just thrown together. Izuku hesitated. Also, my legs can catch fire and I can kick really hard, but that's sort of secondary. Chef Sato's eyebrows rose. Show me. The fire, but I might burn something, not the fire, kid. Show me you understand the food. Izuku looked at the bowl again, his enhanced senses analyzing every component. You started with a sofrito, onions, celery, carrots, but you added fennel for sweetness. The tomatoes are San Marzanos, roasted first to concentrate the flavor. Fresh basil added at the very end so it wouldn't wilt. The pasta water was saved to adjust the sauce consistency, and you finished it with Parmigiano Reggiano and just a touch of good olive oil. Chef Sato was quiet for a long moment. Then he started to laugh. 23 years, he said, shaking his head. 23 years as a pro hero and I never found a sidekick. 1 year running this place and I find one sitting at my counter. Sidekick, Izuku's eyes widened. You were a pro hero, Flame Step, Chef Sato said with a wry smile. Specialized in fire-enhanced kicks and high-speed combat. Lost the leg fighting a villain who could manipulate metal. Decided it was time to hang up the hero costume and focus on my other passion. He gestured around the restaurant. But you know what I learned, kid? Feeding people, taking care of them, that's heroic too. Izuku felt his heart racing. A real pro hero, one whose quirk was similar to his own, and he was right here. Would you? Izuku's voice cracked slightly. Would you teach me, not just cooking, but how to be a hero with this quirk? Chef Sato looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I think I can do that, but it won't be easy. Being a hero isn't just about having power, it's about knowing when and how to use it. And with your particular quirk, he gestured to Izuku's legs, you're going to have to be smarter than most. I want to learn, Izuku said firmly. I want to be a hero who can protect people. All people? All right then, Chef Sato smiled, untying his apron. Let's start with the basics. Can't fight on an empty stomach and you can't cook without understanding your ingredients. We'll work on both. As Chef Sato began pulling ingredients from his refrigerator, explaining the fundamentals of both cuisine and combat, Izuku felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with his quirk. For the first time since his power had manifested, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Outside, the sun was beginning to set over Musutafu, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the same colors as the flames that danced around Hiro's fists and the warmth of a kitchen filled with love. Izuku Midoriya's journey to becoming a hero was just beginning, but he was no longer walking it alone. 3 years passed in what felt like both an eternity and an instant. Every day after school, Izuku would run to Savor, where Chef Sato would be waiting with either a new recipe to master or a training exercise to endure. Sometimes both. Cooking and combat aren't different things, Chef Sato had explained during one of their first lessons, as Izuku struggled to julienne vegetables while maintaining perfect posture. Both require precision, timing, and respect for your tools. Both can be used to nurture or to harm. The choice is always yours. Now, at 13, Izuku could dice an onion in under 30 seconds, prepare a perfect béarnaise sauce while simultaneously practicing kicks, and had developed fighting techniques that Chef Sato admitted surpassed what he'd achieved in his prime. It's your moral code, the former hero had explained. Most fighters hold back subconsciously, afraid of really hurting someone, but you've got built-in limits with women and built-in fury about waste and unfairness. It focuses your power in a way most heroes never achieve. The training had been grueling. Physical conditioning to handle the stress his fire-enhanced kicks put on his body, culinary training that went far beyond simple cooking, and combat practice that incorporated both elements of his quirk. Never forget, Chef Sato would say as Izuku practiced combining precise knife work with acrobatic kicks, your quirk isn't just about fighting, it's about nourishment. Sometimes that means defeating villains, sometimes it means feeding the hungry, and sometimes it means both. But the most important lesson had been about his limitations. Your code isn't a weakness, Chef Sato had insisted after Izuku expressed frustration about his inability to harm women. It's an opportunity to be creative. Some of history's greatest heroes succeeded not through raw power, but through innovation. They'd worked together to develop techniques that could incapacitate without causing lasting harm, precise kicks that hit pressure points to cause temporary paralysis, environmental attacks that trapped opponents, and mobility techniques that let Izuku control the battlefield without directly harming anyone he couldn't bring himself to hurt. Now, as Izuku stood in front of UA High School's imposing gates, a bento box lovingly prepared by Chef Sato in one hand and his acceptance letter in the other, he felt ready. Remember, Chef Sato had told him that morning, you're not trying to be like All Might or any other hero. You're going to be something new. The hero who fights to protect the happiness of others, not just their lives. The cooking hero. Izuku smiled, feeling the familiar warmth in his legs that meant his quirk was responding to his emotions. Around him, other potential students were arriving, some looking nervous, others confident, all of them carrying their own dreams of heroism. As he walked through the gates, Izuku caught sight of a girl with brown hair stumbling on the path ahead. Without thinking, he rushed forward, catching her before she could fall. "Are you okay?" he asked, helping her regain her balance. "Oh, thank you so much," she said, her cheeks pink with embarrassment. "I'm so clumsy, I'm Achako Uraraka, Izuku Midoriya," he replied with a smile. "And don't worry about it. Everyone's nervous today." As they walked toward the entrance exam building together, chatting about their hopes and fears, Izuku felt a sense of rightness. This was where his journey truly began, not as someone trying to fill All Might's shoes, but as someone ready to forge his own path. Behind them, the smell of the bento box in his bag mixed with the morning air, carrying with it all the love, training, and hope that had brought him to this moment. The cooking hero's story was about to begin. 3 weeks into his first semester at UA High School, Izuku Midoriya had already earned an unexpected reputation. Not as the quirky kid with the fire legs, though his classmates certainly remembered his impressive entrance exam performance, but as the student who brought the most incredible lunches. "Midoriya, what is that smell?" Momo Yaoyorozu asked as she approached his desk, her usual composed demeanor cracking slightly as the aroma from his bento box filled the classroom. Izuku looked up from his notes, a slight blush on his cheeks. "Oh, it's just tamagoyaki with a honey miso glaze, some teriyaki chicken I marinated overnight, pickled vegetables I made myself, and onigiri with salmon I smoked yesterday." He spoke as if this was the most normal thing in the world. The entire class had gone silent. Even Bakugo, who had been aggressively scribbling in his notebook, had stopped to stare. "You made all of that?" Achako asked, her eyes wide as she leaned over from the neighboring desk. "It looks professional." "Chef Sato taught me that food is another form of communication," Izuku explained, opening the perfectly arranged bento. "Every dish should tell a story about how much you care for the people eating it." "Chef Sato?" Ieda's hand shot up automatically, even though they weren't in class. "Is this the mentor you mentioned during orientation?" Before Izuku could answer, the classroom door burst open and Present Mike strode in, immediately stopping mid-step as the incredible aroma hit him. "What in the world?" He started at his usual volume, then dropped to a whisper. "Young Midoriya, is that what I think it is?" "Lunch," Izuku offered weakly. "That's not lunch, that's art," Present Mike declared, his eyes sparkling behind his sunglasses. "The balance of umami, the presentation, the way the colors complement each other. Where did you learn to cook like this?" And that was how Izuku found himself explaining his quirk's culinary aspect to an increasingly fascinated classroom. By the time he finished, half his classmates were practically drooling and the other half were looking at him with new respect. "So your quirk makes you a natural chef and gives you fire kicks?" Kirishima grinned. "That's so manly. You could beat villains and feed the hungry at the same time." "That's actually exactly what I want to do," Izuku admitted. "Being a hero isn't just about fighting, it's about making people feel safe and cared for. Sometimes that means protecting them, and sometimes that means making sure they have a good meal." Bakugo snorted from his seat, but Izuku noticed he didn't actually disagree. In fact, Kaken had been different since they'd started at UA. Still explosive, still competitive, but he'd stopped using the old Deku nickname. Now he just called him Kitchen Fire, which somehow felt less insulting and more like an actual hero name. "Well then," Present Mike announced, "I think we've all learned something important today. Now, who wants to tell me about the grammatical structure we covered yesterday?" The collective groan that followed was much less enthusiastic than the food discussion had been. Later that afternoon, Class 1A found themselves boarding a bus headed to the unforeseen simulation joint, the USJ as their teachers called it. Izuku sat next to Achako, a thermos of homemade soup in his backpack because he'd noticed she sometimes skipped lunch to save money. "I'm excited to see what rescue training is like," Achako said, bouncing slightly in her seat. "It feels more, I don't know, heroic than combat training." "I know what you mean," Izuku nodded. "Chef Sato always said that the most heroic thing you can do is help someone who's having the worst day of their life feel a little bit better." "Your mentor sounds wise," Tsu commented from across the aisle. "Ribbit. Though I have to ask, why do you call him chef if he used to be a pro hero?" Izuku smiled. "Because he says that's what he's most proud of now. He told me once that he saved maybe 1,000 people as Flame Step, but he's fed 10,000 as Chef Sato. Both are important, but one builds community." "That's a beautiful way to think about it," Ieda said, his usual stern expression softening. "My brother always says that heroes should inspire others to be their best selves, not just save them from danger." The conversation was interrupted as the bus pulled up to an impressive domed building. Through the windows, they could see the massive structure that housed different disaster simulation zones. "Whoa," Kirishima whistled as they disembarked. "This place is huge." Their guide, the Space Hero 13, met them at the entrance. "Welcome to the USJ, students. Today, we'll be training in various disaster scenarios. Remember, rescue work requires different skills than combat. 13's orientation was suddenly interrupted by a dark, swirling portal opening in the central plaza. Izuku's enhanced senses immediately picked up something wrong, a metallic scent like blood and the acrid smell of fear. "Stay back!" Aizawa-sensei shouted, his capture scarf already unwinding as dozens of villains began pouring through the portal. "Real villains?" Kirishima gasped. "How did they get in?" Yaoyorozu demanded, but Izuku was focused on something else. At the center of the villain group stood a pale man with hands covering his body, and the way he moved, the casual cruelty in his posture, triggered every protective instinct Izuku's quirk had given him. 13, Aizawa called out, "Evacuate the students, I'll hold them off." "But sensei, there's too many," Izuku started. "Go," Aizawa's eyes flashed red as he activated his quirk. "A pro hero always," the rest of his words were lost as he leaped into battle against impossible odds. Chaos erupted as the warp villain, Kurogiri, separated the students with his portal quirk. Izuku felt the familiar disorientation of teleportation just before Hitsu and Mainta found themselves at the bottom of the flooded shipwreck zone. "Where are we?" Mainta wailed as they surfaced, treading water surrounded by what looked like a sunken ship. "The flood zone," Tsu replied calmly, though Izuku could hear the tension in her voice. "Ribbit, and we're not alone." Villains were emerging from the water around them, thugs with shark-like features and other aquatic mutations. They moved through the water like it was their natural habitat, while the three students struggled just to stay afloat. "Fresh meat," one of the villains laughed, showing rows of pointed teeth. "Boss said to kill anyone who ain't the teachers." Izuku's mind raced. His fire-enhanced kicks would be nearly useless underwater, and the three of them were sitting ducks in the open water. But then his enhanced senses picked up something else, the structural damage to the ship, the way the water was flowing, the positioning of debris. "Tsu," he called out quietly, "can you get us to that broken mast over there?" "I can try, Ribbit. But what's the plan?" "Trust me," Izuku said, then raised his voice. "Hey, you call yourselves villains, you're just a bunch of fish." The shark villains snarled and swam toward them aggressively, just as Tsu's tongue wrapped around them and launched all three students toward the ship's wreckage. "Now what?" Mainta demanded as they landed on the tilted deck. "Now I cook," Izuku said with determination. He positioned himself at the ship's highest point and began focusing his quirk not on his legs, but on the metal around him. The heat from his flames wouldn't work underwater, but it could work on the steel of the ship itself. "Midoriya, what are you?" Tsu started. "The ship is full of pressurized air pockets," Izuku explained as he kicked specific structural points, his flames heating the metal until it became malleable. "If I can create the right kind of rupture." With a tremendous crash, an entire section of the ship's hull collapsed, creating a massive air bubble that trapped most of the water-breathing villains in an environment where they couldn't function properly. "Incredible," Tsu breathed. "You used environmental control instead of direct combat." "Chef Sato taught me that the best way to win a fight is to control the kitchen," Izuku said with a grin. "Same principle applies here." With the villains incapacitated, the three students began making their way back toward the central plaza, where they could see their homeroom teacher fighting what looked like an impossibly strong monster. By the time they rejoined the main battle, the situation had grown desperate. Aizawa lay broken and bloodied on the ground, held down by the hand-covered villain who'd been directing the attack. The massive, bird-like creature, what the villains called Namu, stood ready to deliver a killing blow. "Sensei!" Izuku shouted, his legs already igniting as he prepared to launch himself into the fray. "Don't be stupid, Midoriya," Bakugo appeared beside him, explosions crackling from his palms. "That thing isn't normal, I don't care." Izuku's flames burned brighter. "I won't let it hurt our teacher." But before any of them could move, the USJS entrance doors exploded inward. "It's fine now," a familiar voice called out across the facility. "Why?" "Because I am here." All Might strode into the USJ, and for a moment, even the villains froze. This was the symbol of peace in his element, not the slightly awkward teacher from class, but the hero who had inspired a generation. "All Might?" Izuku felt tears of relief spring to his eyes. The battle that followed was unlike anything Izuku had ever witnessed. All Might moved with power and precision that defied comprehension, trading devastating blows with the Namu while simultaneously protecting the injured Aizawa. But even as he watched his idol fight, Izuku noticed something troubling. All Might was breathing heavily, and there was something desperate in the way he fought, as if he was racing against time itself. "Students," 13 called out. "We need to evacuate." "No," Izuku said firmly, surprising everyone. "Look at All Might, something's wrong. He's not fighting like he usually does." And he was right. The #1 hero was struggling in a way that didn't match his public image. Each punch seemed to cost him more than it should, and there were moments where his movements looked almost strained. "What are you saying?" Iida demanded. "I'm saying," Izuku replied, his analytical mind putting together pieces he didn't want to believe, "that All Might need our help." As if to prove his point, the hand-covered villain, Shigaraki, suddenly moved toward All Might's back while the hero was grappling with the Namu. One touch from those decay Quirk hands would be fatal. Without thinking, Izuku launched himself forward, his fire-enhanced kick aimed not at Shigaraki himself, but at the ground beside him. The impact sent up a cloud of debris and dust that forced the villain to retreat, breaking his focus. "Midoriya," All Might's voice carried both gratitude and concern. "We're here to help," Bakugo shouted, appearing on Shigaraki's other side with Kirishima and Todoroki. "No way we're letting some creepy hand freak hurt our teacher." For a moment, Shigaraki looked genuinely frustrated. "This isn't how it was supposed to go," he muttered, scratching at his neck. "Kurogiri, we're leaving, but Tamura, the plan failed," Shigaraki snapped. "Too many variables. Too many heroes willing to interfere." As the villains retreated through Kurogiri's portals, All Might finally delivered the finishing blow to the Namu, sending it flying clear through the USJ's roof. But instead of his usual triumphant pose, he immediately collapsed to one knee, breathing heavily. "All Might!" Izuku rushed to his side, and up close he could see something that shocked him. The hero looked smaller somehow, frailer. "I'm all right, young Midoriya," All Might said, but his voice lacked its usual booming confidence. "Just tired." Later, after the police had finished their investigation and the injured had been taken to the hospital, Class 1A gathered in their dormitory common room. The attack had shaken all of them, but it had also created a bond that hadn't existed before. Izuku sat at the kitchen counter, methodically preparing tea for everyone. It was something Chef Sato had taught him. After trauma, people need comfort, and there's something healing about the ritual of a shared meal. "Midoriya," Yaoyorozu said quietly as she accepted a cup of perfectly brewed green tea, "what you did today. Using your quirk for environmental control instead of direct combat, that was incredibly smart. And incredibly reckless," Iida added, though his tone was more worried than critical. "You could have been seriously hurt." "But he wasn't," Kirishima pointed out. "And he saved Aizawa-sensei. That was so manly." Izuku looked around at his classmates, really looked at them. Achako, who had worked with Iida to get help. Todoroki, who had stepped up to fight despite his own complicated feelings about heroism. Bakugo, who had put aside his pride to work as a team. Tsu, who had stayed calm under pressure and helped execute his plan perfectly. "We all saved each other today," he said quietly. "That's what heroes do. We don't just fight villains, we protect the people who matter to us." "Is that what your mentor taught you?" Tsu asked. Izuku smiled, thinking of Chef Sato and all their lessons in the little restaurant. "He taught me that strength isn't just about how hard you can hit. It's about making the people around you feel safe enough to be their best selves. Today, you all made me feel brave enough to be a hero." As his classmates settled in with their tea, sharing quiet conversations about the day's events, Izuku felt a warmth that had nothing to do with his quirk. This was what Chef Sato had meant about building community. These people weren't just his classmates anymore. They were his family. And tomorrow, he'd make them the best breakfast they'd ever had. Outside, the sun was setting over UA High School, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Inside, 19 students who had faced real danger together were learning what it truly meant to be heroes, not through individual strength, but through the bonds they formed with each other. The cooking hero's first real test was complete, but his journey was just beginning. The roar of 50,000 spectators filled the UA Sports Festival Stadium as Class 1A stepped onto the field. Izuku felt his heart hammering against his ribs as he took in the massive crowd, the professional heroes in the VIP boxes, and the cameras broadcasting live across Japan. "Welcome to the most exciting event in the hero calendar," President Mike's voice boomed across the stadium. "The UA Sports Festival where tomorrow's heroes prove themselves today." Beside him, Achako looked pale but determined. "This is really happening," she whispered. "Just remember what we practiced," Izuku replied quietly, adjusting the special lunch box tucked into his utility belt, a collection of energy bars he'd made specifically for the festival, designed to provide quick nutrition without weighing him down. "The student representative will now lead the athlete's oath," Midnight announced from the referee platform, her hero costume somehow even more revealing than usual. Representing the first-year students. "Katsuki Bakugo!" A collective groan went up from the non-1A students as Bakugo swaggered to the microphone. Izuku held his breath, hoping his childhood friend wouldn't say anything too inflammatory. "I just want to say," Bakugo grabbed the microphone with his characteristic intensity, "I'm gonna win this whole damn thing." The boos from the other classes were immediate and deafening. Izuku covered his face with his hands as his classmates around him cringed. "Well," Iida said with forced optimism, "at least he's confident." "He just painted a target on all of us," Todoroki observed coolly. His heterochromatic eyes found Izuku in the crowd. "Midoriya." "Yeah, I'm going to beat you," Todoroki said with quiet intensity. "I'm going to show everyone here what real power looks like, and I'm going to do it without using my old man's quirk." Izuku felt the familiar heat building in his legs, not from anger but from excitement. Finally, a chance to test himself against the best of his generation. "I won't make it easy for you," he replied with a grin that would have made Chef Sato proud. "The first trial is a 4-kilometer obstacle course around the stadium," Midnight announced. "Anything goes as long as you don't leave the course. Now, on your mark." Izuku positioned himself in the middle of the pack, his enhanced senses analyzing the narrow exit tunnel ahead. With hundreds of students all trying to squeeze through at once, it was going to be a bottleneck, unless someone found a way to thin the crowd. "GET set," that someone turned out to be Todoroki. The moment the starting signal sounded, ice erupted from his right side, freezing the ground and most of the students behind him. But Izuku had been expecting something like this. "Sorry, everyone," he called out as he leaped into the air, his fire-enhanced kick launching him clear over the frozen crowd and the ice patches. The heat from his flames melted the ice directly beneath him, giving him solid footing as he landed. "Damn Deku!" Bakugo's explosions crackled as he blasted his way through the ice. Always showing off. Behind them, Yaoyorozu had created a staff to pole vault over the ice, while Kirishima and others powered through with brute force. But as they emerged from the tunnel, they faced the first real obstacle, massive robots from the entrance exam. "0-pointers," Izuku breathed, remembering his first encounter with these mechanical giants. But this time, he had a plan. Instead of trying to fight the robots directly, Izuku analyzed their construction with his enhanced senses. The joints, the balance points, the way they moved, it was like deconstructing a complex recipe. "Environmental control," he murmured, echoing one of Chef Sato's lessons. He launched himself at the nearest robot, not at its head or torso, but at the structural supports in its legs. His fire-enhanced kicks targeted the weak points with surgical precision, causing the massive machine to topple sideways. The crash created a domino effect, with one robot falling into another. Within moments, Izuku had cleared a path through the entire obstacle without destroying a single robot, just by understanding how they worked. "Incredible," President Mike's voice carried over the chaos. Student Midoriya just cleared the robot field using pure strategy, but Todoroki was still in the lead, skating across the field on a path of ice. Izuku grinned and gave chase, his legs igniting as he bounded from robot to fallen robot, using their metal bodies as stepping stones. The second obstacle was a canyon crossed by narrow stone pillars connected with ropes. Most students were carefully making their way across, but Izuku had a different idea. "Trust your training," he whispered, thinking of all those hours balancing on knife edges while Chef Sato made him dice vegetables. His enhanced proprioception, honed by years of precise cooking, made the rope bridges feel like highways. He leaped from pillar to pillar, his fire-enhanced jumps carrying him across gaps that would have been impossible for a normal person. Within minutes, he'd caught up to the leading pack. The final obstacle was a minefield, a field scattered with small explosives designed to slow down the leaders and give the trailing students a chance to catch up. This is where being first becomes a disadvantage, Izuku realized, watching Todoroki carefully pick his way through the field. The ice user was having to go slowly, testing each step. But Izuku's enhanced senses could detect the slight chemical smell of the explosives, could feel the tiny vibrations in the ground that indicated where they were buried. It was like identifying ingredients in a complex sauce. Each component had its own signature. "Time to cook," he said with a grin and launched himself into the air. Instead of trying to avoid the mines, Izuku aimed for the largest cluster of them in the center of the field. His fire-enhanced kick detonated a dozen mines at once, creating a massive explosion that launched him high into the air and forward, clear over most of the remaining minefield. He landed just behind Todoroki and Bakugo, who were still carefully navigating the explosives. "You're insane, kitchen fire," Bakugo shouted as they sprinted toward the finish line. "Just creative," Izuku called back, his legs burning with effort as he pushed himself to keep up with the two most powerful students in their class. In the end, Todoroki crossed first, followed by Bakugo, with Izuku taking third place. As he crossed the finish line, breathing heavily but grinning, he could hear Chef Sato's voice in his head. Sometimes the best way to win is to change the rules of the game. "The second event is a cavalry battle," Midnight announced as the qualified students gathered in the arena center. "You'll form teams of 2-4 people, with the rider wearing a headband worth points based on your placement in the obstacle course." Izuku felt his stomach drop as the point values were announced. Most students were worth 5-10 points based on their placement. But as the first-place finisher had gotten 0 points due to the mine strategy, that meant the student in third place will be worth 10 million points. The entire stadium went silent. Then, slowly, every single qualified student turned to stare at Izuku with expressions ranging from determination to outright hunger. Midoriya Achako appeared at his side, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by fierce loyalty. "I'm with you." "Me too," said a quiet voice. Fumikage Takayami stepped forward, dark shadow writhing around his shoulders. "Your strategy in the obstacle course was impressive. I'd like to see what you can do with proper support." "And I'll provide technical assistance," Mei Hatsum declared, her support course goggles gleaming. "This will be a perfect opportunity to show off my babies." As the teams formed around the arena, Izuku found himself at the center of a storm. Every other team was positioning themselves to target his group, while his own teammates looked to him for leadership. "Okay," he said, his analytical mind kicking into overdrive. "They're all going to come at us at once. We need to think of this like a dinner rush at a busy restaurant. Lots of orders coming in, everything happening at once, but each task has to be handled with precision." "I like the analogy," Takayami said dryly, "though I suspect this dinner rush will involve more explosions." The battle began with exactly the chaos Izuku had predicted. Teams converged on them from every direction, with Bakugo's group leading the charge from the front while Todoroki's team moved to flank them. "Uraraka, make us weightless," Takayami, defense. "Hatsum, whatever you've got that can help us move," his team responded instantly. Uraraka's quirk lifted them off the ground, while Dark Shadow expanded into a protective barrier around them. Hatsum activated some kind of jetpack system that sent them rocketing across the battlefield. But even with their mobility, they were vastly outnumbered. Teams kept coming at them in waves, and Izuku found himself having to make split-second decisions about when to use his fire-enhanced kicks and when to rely on evasion. The real challenge came when they encountered Team Shinso, the general studies student with the brainwashing quirk. "Hey, Midoriya," Shinso called out as his team approached. "Must be nice getting all that attention just because you got lucky in the obstacle course." Izuku opened his mouth to respond, and immediately realized his mistake. His body began moving without his control, walking directly toward Shinso's team. No, he thought desperately, I can't let my team down, but it was Takayami who saved him. Dark Shadow, acting on its own instincts rather than any verbal command, lashed out and knocked Shinso's team back before they could steal the headband. "Thanks," Izuku gasped as he regained control. "I almost focus on the battle," Takayami said calmly. "We still have 2 minutes left and everyone else is making their final push." The last 2 minutes were pure chaos. Bakugo's team came at them with explosive fury, while Todoroki's group used ice and precision strikes to try and corner them. Other teams swarmed from every direction, all desperate for those 10 million points. In the final seconds, as time ran down and the teams clashed in the center of the arena, Izuku found himself face-to-face with Todoroki. The ice user's hand reached for the headband around Izuku's forehead, his expression coldly determined. "I told you I'd beat you," Todoroki said. "Not yet," Izuku replied, and in that moment his Quirk's built-in sense of fairness kicked in. Todoroki was limiting himself, refusing to use his fire side. But that wasn't a fair fight, that was self-sabotage. Instead of dodging away, Izuku grabbed Todoroki's wrist. "Use your fire," he shouted over the chaos. "You'll never beat me while you're holding back." For just an instant, Todoroki's eyes widened. Then fire erupted from his left side, not at Izuku but into the air, a brilliant display of power that he'd been suppressing his entire life. The distraction cost them both. As Todoroki stared at his own flames in shock, other teams swarmed around them. When time was called, Izuku's team had managed to advance to the finals, but just barely, and only because Takayami had managed to snatch a qualifying headband in the final seconds. "Why?" Todoroki asked as the teams disbanded. "Why did you tell me to use my fire? You could have won." Izuku smiled, thinking of Chef Sato and all their conversations about what it meant to be a hero. "Because beating you while you're not at full strength wouldn't mean anything. When we fight in the finals, I want to face the real you." During the break between the Cavalry battle and the final tournament, Izuku found himself in an unexpected situation. The other students who hadn't made it to the finals were hungry, tired, and disappointed, and somehow word had spread that the cooking hero had brought food. Midoriya, Kendo from Class 1B, appeared at his side with several of her classmates. "Is it true you made energy bars for the festival?" "Well, yes, but they're just... Could we maybe try some? The concession stand food is terrible and we're all pretty drained." Before Izuku knew it, he was surrounded by students from multiple classes, all looking hopefully at his utility belt. His enhanced senses could detect their exhaustion, their low blood sugar, the way their bodies were craving proper nutrition after the intense physical exertion. I don't have enough for everyone," he said apologetically. "Then make more," Meihatsum declared. "I saw a kitchen in the staff area. I bet I could get us access." What followed was one of the most surreal experiences of Izuku's life. While the stadium prepared for the final tournament matches, he found himself in UA's staff kitchen, surrounded by dozens of students from multiple classes and courses, all helping him prepare food. "Dice those vegetables smaller," he instructed Yaoyorozu, who was working alongside Tetsu from Class 1B. "We need them to cook evenly." "How much salt should I add to this?" asked Shiozaki, stirring a massive pot of soup. "Taste it first," Izuku replied, managing 3 different dishes simultaneously. "Your palate will tell you what it needs." Even some of the teachers had gotten involved. Present Mike was manning a grill outside, while Aizawa-sensei sat in the corner grading papers and occasionally offering dry commentary about the controlled chaos around him. "This is highly irregular," Cementos observed as he helped carry supplies. "But effective," All Might added, his skeletal form hidden by an apron that read "World's #1 Chef." "Look at them," Cementos. "They're not competing anymore, they're cooperating." And he was right. Students who had been rivals minutes earlier were now working together, sharing cooking tips and stories. The stress and competition of the festival had given way to something more fundamental, people taking care of each other. "You know," Kendo said as she helped Izuku plate the final dishes, "I understand your hero name now." "Hero name?" "The cooking hero. You don't just fight to protect people, you nourish them. You make them stronger, happier, more connected to each other." She gestured around the kitchen, where students from 4 different courses were sharing a meal they'd prepared together. "This is just as heroic as anything that happens in the arena." Izuku felt warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with his quirk. This was what Chef Sato had been trying to teach him all along, that being a hero wasn't just about winning fights. It was about making people feel cared for, valued, part of something larger than themselves. The final tournament bracket was announced as students filed back into the arena, stomachs full and spirits renewed. Izuku found himself in the bracket opposite Todoroki, meaning they wouldn't face each other until the finals, if they both made it that far. His first match was against Hitoshi Shinso, the general studies student with the brainwashing quirk. "So we meet again," Shinso said as they stood in the arena center. "Still think you're better than those of us who didn't make it into the hero course?" This time, Izuku was ready. Instead of responding verbally, he wrote his reply on a piece of paper and held it up. "I think you belong in the hero course. Prove it." Shinso's eyes widened at the unexpected respect, and for just a moment, his determined expression faltered. That moment was all Izuku needed. He launched himself forward with a fire-enhanced kick, not aimed at Shinso but at the ground beside him, creating a cloud of dust and debris that forced the general studies student to retreat. The match continued in silence, with Izuku using environmental attacks and mobility to stay out of conversational range while gradually herding Shinso toward the arena boundary. When it ended with Shinso stepping out of bounds, both students were breathing heavily. "That was a good fight," Izuku said afterward, offering his hand. "You'd make a great hero." "Thanks," Shinso replied, accepting the handshake. "Don't lose to someone stupid, okay?" Izuku's subsequent matches followed a similar pattern. Against Iida, he used his enhanced agility to stay ahead of Recipro engine's speed bursts until his opponent's engines overheated. Against Takayami, he used small, controlled bursts of flame to keep Dark Shadow at bay without actually harming his teammate. But it was his semi-final match against Bakugo that truly tested his growth. "Kitchen fire!" Bakugo snarled as they faced off in the arena center. "I'm gonna show everyone that I'm the strongest, that I'm better than All Might, better than that half-and-half bastard, and especially better than you." "Kakin," Izuku said quietly, and the use of the old nickname made Bakugo pause. "You're already amazing, you don't have to prove that to anyone. Don't you dare pity me." Bakugo's explosions crackled as he launched himself forward. "Fight me seriously or I'll never forgive you." What followed was the most intense battle of Izuku's life. Bakugo came at him with everything he had: massive explosions that lit up the arena, precision strikes that showcased years of combat experience, and a strategic mind that had analyzed every one of Izuku's previous matches. But Izuku had grown too. He used his enhanced mobility to stay ahead of the explosive attacks, his analytical mind to predict Bakugo's patterns, and his fire-enhanced kicks to match the raw power of his childhood friend's quirk. The turning point came when Bakugo, in his fury to prove his superiority, overextended himself on a massive explosion. The recoil left him vulnerable for just an instant, but that was enough. Izuku's fire-enhanced kick caught Bakugo in the solar plexus, launching him clear across the arena and out of bounds. As the crowd erupted in cheers, Izuku rushed to his fallen friend's side. "Kakin, are you okay?" Bakugo lay on his back, staring at the sky, his usual explosive personality replaced by something quieter. "You got strong," he said finally. "Really strong. So did you. That was the best fight I've ever had. Don't get sentimental on me, Deku," but there was no heat in the old nickname anymore. "Just don't lose to half and half, okay? If someone's gonna beat me, it better be someone who can go all the way." The finals were held under the lights as evening fell over the stadium. Izuku and Todoroki stood in the center of the arena, the culmination of everything they'd worked for, with 50,000 people watching and millions more on television. "Are you ready?" Todoroki asked, ice already beginning to form around his right side. "Are you?" Izuku replied, his legs beginning to glow with heat. "All of you this time," Todoroki's expression tightened. "I told you. I won't use his power." The battle began with Todoroki's massive ice attack, a glacier that filled half the arena and would have frozen most opponents solid. But Izuku was ready. His fire-enhanced kick shattered through the ice like it was glass, sending him rocketing toward his opponent wreathed in flames. "Use your fire," Izuku shouted as he landed, immediately having to dodge another ice attack. "You're better than this? I don't need it," Todoroki replied, but there was strain in his voice. The repeated ice attacks were taking their toll, frost beginning to form on his own body as his temperature dropped. They fought across the arena in a display that had the crowd on their feet. Ice and fire, precision and power, two students pushing each other to their absolute limits. But as the match progressed, it became clear that Todoroki's self-imposed limitation was becoming a critical weakness. "You're holding back," Izuku called out as he shattered another ice wall. "That's not respect for your opponent, that's disrespect." "Shut up." Todoroki's ice attacks became more frantic, less controlled. "You don't understand. This power isn't mine, it's his." "No," Izuku's voice carried across the entire stadium as his flames burned brighter. "Your power is yours, it doesn't matter where it came from, what matters is what you do with it." For a moment, the two students stood facing each other across the scarred arena floor. Todoroki was breathing heavily, frost covering his right side, while Izuku's legs blazed with heat that shimmered the air around him. "My power," Todoroki whispered, staring at his left hand, "is yours to use however you choose," Izuku finished. "So choose, fight me with everything you've got or don't fight me at all." The explosion of flame that erupted from Todoroki's left side was visible from orbit. The ice on his body melted instantly, steam filling the arena as his two quirks balanced each other for the first time in his life. When the steam cleared, he stood transformed, not the half-ice, half-fire student who had been holding himself back, but a hero ready to embrace his full potential. "Thank you," Todoroki said quietly. Then louder, "Now let's see what we can really do." The final exchange was spectacular. Todoroki's ice and fire working in perfect harmony, creating attacks that showcased the true potential of his quirk. Izuku responding with everything he'd learned from Chef Sato, every technique they'd practiced, every lesson about using power to protect rather than destroy. In the end, it came down to one final clash. Todoroki's ultimate technique, a spiraling combination of ice and fire that could have leveled a building, met Izuku's most powerful kick, his flames burning so bright they turned blue. The explosion shook the entire stadium. When the dust settled, both students lay at the edge of the arena boundary, exhausted but victorious in their own ways. It's a double knockout," Present Mike announced. "But wait, let me check the replay, yes." Student Todoroki's foot crossed the boundary line a split second before student Midoriya's. "The winner of the UA Sports Festival is Izuku Midoriya." The crowd erupted as Izuku slowly pulled himself to his feet, his legs still smoking from the final exchange. But instead of celebrating, he immediately went to check on Todoroki. "Are you okay?" Todoroki smiled, the first genuine smile Izuku had ever seen from him. "I'm perfect. For the first time in my life, I feel perfect." He accepted Izuku's hand up. "You won fair and square, congratulations." As All Might presented Izuku with the winner's medal, the #1 hero leaned close and whispered, "You did more than win today, young Midoriya. You helped a fellow student find himself. That's what true heroes do." Looking out at the crowd, at his classmates cheering from the stands, at Todoroki standing beside him with newfound peace in his expression, Izuku understood what Chef Sato had been trying to teach him all along. Being a hero wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest or the most powerful. It was about using whatever gifts you had to help others become the best versions of themselves. It was about nourishing not just their bodies but their spirits. As fireworks lit up the night sky over the UA Sports Festival, Izuku Midoriya, the cooking hero, stood ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. He had learned that his greatest power wasn't the fire in his legs or his culinary skills. It was his ability to help others discover the fire within themselves. 2 weeks after the sports festival, the hero world was buzzing with analysis of the new generation. Izuku found himself thrust into an unexpected spotlight, not just as the festival winner but as something entirely new. The media had dubbed him the cooking hero, Sanji, and the name was already sticking. "You've got 17 internship offers," Aizawa-sensei announced as he dropped a thick stack of papers on Izuku's desk. "Most are from heroes who want to understand your unique approach to heroics. A few are from celebrity chefs who think you should quit hero work entirely." Izuku flipped through the offers with growing amazement. Pro heroes he'd only dreamed of meeting, prestigious agencies, even an offer from the #2 hero, Endeavor, though that one made his stomach turn, knowing what he now understood about Todoroki's family situation. "Any catch your interest?" Ochako asked, peering over his shoulder at the pile. Actually, Izuku pulled out a single letter from near the bottom of the stack. The letterhead was simple. "Manuel's office, the normal hero. This one." "Manuel?" Iida looked up from his own stack of offers, his expression puzzled. "But he's not particularly well known. Surely you could intern with someone more prestigious?" "That's exactly why I want to go with him," Izuku explained. "The big-name heroes all want to study my quirk or use me for publicity, but Manuel, look at his offer. He says he wants to teach me about the everyday heroism that happens between the big battles." That sounds like something Chef Sato would say. What Izuku didn't mention was his other reason for choosing Manuel's agency in Hasu City. Over the past week, there had been troubling reports from that area, heroes being attacked by someone the media had dubbed the hero killer. Something about the pattern of attacks was bothering him, a nagging sense that this villain was different from the usual criminals. "Well," Aizawa said with his characteristic dry tone, "at least you won't be bored. Hasu's been having some unusual villain activity lately." Manuel's agency turned out to be exactly what Izuku had hoped for, a small, street-level operation focused on community policing and disaster relief. The hero himself was a soft-spoken man in his 30s whose water-based quirk was more useful for putting out fires than fighting villains. "Most of hero work isn't dramatic battles," Manuel explained as they patrolled Hasu's shopping district on Izuku's first day. "It's helping lost children find their parents, directing traffic around accidents, being visible so people feel safe. The flashy stuff gets the headlines, but this is what really makes a difference." Izuku found himself nodding along enthusiastically. Chef Sato always said something similar about cooking. The fancy dishes get the attention, but it's the everyday meals that actually nourish people. "Exactly," Manuel's face lit up. "Though I have to ask, what's in that container you've been carrying around? It smells incredible." Izuku blushed slightly. "Just some emergency rations I made, high-energy food bars with balanced nutrients for long patrols. I noticed most heroes rely on convenient store food during long shifts, but that's not really optimal for maintaining peak performance." Manuel accepted one of the bars and took a bite. His eyes immediately widened. This is amazing. How did you—" "Never mind, I don't want to know your secrets, but would you consider making more? For the agency, I mean, I'll pay for the ingredients." "You don't have to pay me," Izuku said quickly. "Taking care of people is part of being a hero, right?" That afternoon, Izuku found himself in Manuel's agency kitchen, preparing meals for the entire staff while his internship supervisor handled paperwork. It was peaceful work, chopping vegetables with the precision his quirk granted him, seasoning dishes by instinct, creating food that would give the heroes the energy they needed for their demanding jobs. "Midoriya," Manuel's voice carried a note of concern as he approached the kitchen. "We just got a report. There's been another hero killer attack." Izuku's hands stilled on the knife he was holding. "Anyone hurt?" "The hero survived, but just barely. That makes 7 attacks in the past month." Manuel's expression was grim. "The pattern is troubling. He's not killing randomly, he's choosing specific heroes. All of them have been. Well, let's say they weren't exactly paragons of heroic virtue." "What do you mean?" Manuel hesitated. "Heroes who were in it for the money or the fame. Heroes who'd been caught taking shortcuts or treating civilians poorly. It's like he's trying to purify the hero profession." A chill ran down Izuku's spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. That's really dangerous thinking." "Agreed, be extra careful during patrols. If you see anyone suspicious." The rest of Manuel's words were drowned out by an explosion somewhere in the distance, followed immediately by the wail of emergency sirens. The Namu attack began just after sunset, when Izuku was helping Manuel coordinate evacuation efforts in the shopping district. The brain-exposed monsters appeared without warning, emerging from alleyways and rooftops to spread chaos throughout the city. "This isn't random," Izuku observed as he watched the pattern of attacks from their command post. "They're driving people toward specific areas, hurting them." "You're right," Manuel agreed, studying the tactical display. "But toward what?" Their answer came in the form of a text message that made Izuku's blood run cold. Emergency. Send location. It was from Iida. I have to go, Izuku said, already moving toward the door. Wait, Manuel called out. Where are you going? My friend is in trouble. Izuku paused, his hand on the door handle. I know you told me to stay with the evacuation, but go, Manuel said quietly. That's what a real hero would do. Izuku found Iida in an alley several blocks away from the main Namu attacks, and the scene that greeted him was something out of his nightmares. His friend lay on the ground, bleeding from multiple stab wounds, while a tall figure in dark clothes stood over him with blood-stained blades. The hero killer, Stain. Another fake hero come to play at rescue? Stain's voice was rough, filled with contempt. You children don't understand what it means to get away from him. The words came out colder than Izuku had ever spoken, his legs already beginning to ignite. Stain turned to look at him, and for the first time, Izuku saw the villain's face, scarred, weathered, with eyes that burned with fanatical conviction. Interesting, Stain mused, his gaze taking in Izuku's stance, the way his flames danced around his legs. You're different from the others, there's no fear in your eyes, no hesitation. Tell me, boy, why do you want to be a hero? To protect people, Izuku replied without hesitation. To make sure nobody has to face the worst day of their life alone. Stain's expression shifted slightly. Protect people, not for justice or for fame or because it's my job, just. To protect people? That's right. Even corrupt heroes, even the fakes and frauds who disgrace the title. Izuku thought of Endeavor, of the heroes he'd met who seemed more interested in rankings than rescue work, of the celebrity heroes who appeared more concerned with their image than their impact. Even them, because nobody deserves to die just for being imperfect. Imperfect, Stain repeated, and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Is that what you call it when heroes abandon their duty for profit? When they let civilians die because saving them wouldn't improve their ratings? I call it human, Izuku said firmly. People make mistakes, people lose sight of what's important. But that doesn't mean they can't change, can't become better. Killing them just ends any chance of that growth. Stain was quiet for a long moment, his blades still held at ready positions. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. You're either very wise or very naive, boy, perhaps both. He shifted his stance slightly, and Izuku realized the hero killer was preparing to attack. Let's see which one survives tonight. The fight began with Stain's incredible speed, the villain closing the distance between them in an instant. But Izuku had been training for this kind of close-quarters combat with Chef Sato for years. He twisted aside from the blade thrust, his fire-enhanced kick catching Stain in the ribs and sending him skidding across the alley floor. Fast, Stain acknowledged, rolling back to his feet. And those flames, they're not just for show. You've trained with someone who understood combat. The best teacher I ever had, Izuku replied, staying light on his feet as Stain circled him like a predator. He taught me that strength should be used to protect, not to judge. Protect, Stain spat. Like your friend, they're protected anyone. Like any of these false heroes protect anyone but their own reputations. Iida made a mistake, Izuku admitted. He came here for revenge, not rescue. But that doesn't make him evil, it makes him human. It makes him someone who can learn and grow. Growth, Stain mused as he launched another attack, this time with multiple blades in a complex pattern that would have carved up most opponents. An interesting concept from someone so young. Izuku's response was a series of precise kicks that deflected each blade, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to match Stain's weapon mastery with his own martial arts. But he could feel the hero killer testing him, probing his defenses, looking for weaknesses. Tell me, boy, Stain said as their battle continued across the alley, what do you do when protection requires violence? When the only way to save innocent lives is to take a guilty one? The question hit Izuku like a physical blow, mainly because it was something he'd struggled with himself. His Quirk's moral imperatives made it difficult to harm women, impossible to waste food, but what about truly evil people? What about villains who would never change, never stop hurting others? I find another way, Izuku said finally, his flames burning brighter. There's always another way. Always, Stain's laugh was bitter. How wonderfully innocent, but what happens when there isn't? What happens when your code prevents you from doing what needs to be done? As if to illustrate his point, Stain suddenly changed tactics. Instead of attacking Izuku directly, he threw one of his blades toward the paralyzed Iida, the weapon spinning end over end toward his friend's throat. Izuku moved without thinking, his body interposing itself between the blade and Iida. The weapon caught him across the shoulder, drawing blood, and suddenly he understood Stain's quirk. The hero killer could paralyze people by ingesting their blood. But as the paralysis began to set in, Izuku realized something else. The blade had been thrown with perfect precision. Stain could have killed Iida instantly, but instead he'd used the attack to test Izuku's convictions. Interesting, Stain mused as Izuku struggled against the paralysis. You really would sacrifice yourself for someone else, even someone who came here seeking revenge rather than justice. That's what heroes do, Izuku managed to say through gritted teeth. Is it? Stain approached slowly, his remaining blade gleaming in the streetlight. Or is that what heroes are supposed to do? Because in my experience, most of them talk about sacrifice but run when things get difficult. The paralysis was wearing off faster than it should have, Izuku realized. His enhanced metabolism, the same thing that made him such a natural cook, was also processing the effects of Stain's quirk more quickly than normal. You're different, Stain observed, noticing the same thing. Your quirk. It's not just about fighting, is it? It's about nourishment, about caring for others. That's right, Izuku said, slowly regaining feeling in his limbs. My teacher used to say that true strength comes from making other people stronger, not from proving how powerful you are. Your teacher sounds like someone I would have respected, Stain said quietly. Then his voice hardened again. But teachers can be wrong. The world is full of people who claim to care while doing nothing to help, full of heroes who smile for cameras while children starve in the streets. Then fix it, Izuku said, surprising the hero killer. If you care so much about true heroism, then be a true hero. Help people instead of killing them. Inspire change instead of forcing it. I tried that, Stain replied, and for a moment his fanatical mask slipped to reveal something more vulnerable underneath. I tried being the kind of hero you're describing, but the system, it doesn't reward that kind of heroism. It rewards flashy displays and high rankings and corporate sponsorships. So you decided to tear it all down. I decided to purify it, Stain corrected. To remind people what heroism really means by eliminating the fakes and frauds. But you're not eliminating them, Izuku pointed out, his strength returning as they talked. You're just making the real heroes more afraid to make mistakes. You're making everyone more focused on appearance than substance because they're terrified of being judged. Stain paused, his blade hovering in the air. What? Think about it, Izuku continued, slowly pushing himself to his feet. Every hero you've killed, every attack you've made, what has it actually changed? Are heroes more genuine now, more focused on helping people? Or are they just more paranoid? For the first time since the fight began, Stain looked uncertain. The heroes who were already genuine didn't need your lesson, Izuku pressed on. And the heroes who weren't genuine just got better at hiding it. All you've done is create fear without creating growth. Then what would you do? Stain demanded, his voice angry but also genuinely curious. How would you change a system that rewards selfishness and punishes compassion? Izuku thought of Chef Sato's little restaurant, of the way food brought people together, of the sports festival kitchen where students from different classes had worked side by side. I'd show them a better way, he said simply. I'd be the kind of hero that inspires others to be better, not the kind that makes them afraid to try. I'd build communities instead of tearing them down. And if that doesn't work, if the system refuses to change, then I'd change the system, but I'd do it by proving that another way is possible, not by destroying everything that exists. Stain stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly he lowered his blade. You remind me of someone, he said quietly. Someone I used to know, someone I used to be, perhaps. He looked down at Iida, who was beginning to stir as his own paralysis wore off. Your friend, he came here for revenge, that's not heroic. No, Izuku agreed, but it's understandable. His brother was hurt and he wanted to make someone pay for that pain. It's not right, but it's human. And you would defend someone who acts out of such base motivations. I would help them find a better way, Izuku corrected, just like I'm trying to help you. Stain's laugh was shorter this time, less bitter. Help me, a serial killer who spent months hunting heroes. help you remember why you wanted to be a hero in the first place, Izuku said, because that's what this is really about, isn't it? You're not a villain who hates heroes, you're a hero who's lost faith in heroism. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. Other heroes were coming, drawn by the sounds of battle. They'll arrest me, Stain said matter-of-factly. Execute me probably, my crusade is over. Maybe, Izuku agreed, but it doesn't have to be meaningless. Help us understand what went wrong. Help us figure out how to build something better. Stain looked at him one more time, then at the approaching lights of the rescue heroes. Izuku Midoriya, he said, and Izuku realized the hero killer had known his name all along. The cooking hero, you may be the only one of your generation worth the title. I'm not the only one, Izuku replied. There are others like me, others who understand that heroism is about service, not glory. We're going to change things. See that you do, Stain said. Then he dropped his weapons and raised his hands as the professional heroes arrived. The arrest of the hero killer made headlines across Japan, but the official reports left out most of what had actually happened in that alley. Izuku's role was minimized, Stain's philosophy was ignored, and the whole incident was spun as a simple case of a deranged villain being brought to justice. That's probably for the best, Manuel said as they sat in his office the next morning, watching the news coverage. The public doesn't need to know how close Stain came to actually making sense. But that's the problem, Izuku protested. If we don't address his actual concerns, if we just dismiss him as crazy, then someone else will come along with the same ideas and better execution. And what would you suggest we do instead? Izuku thought for a moment, then pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. Chef Sato, it's Izuku. I need to ask you something about building communities. 3 days later, Izuku stood in front of a small group of pro-heroes in Manuel's office, a presentation board covered with his notes and diagrams. The hero killer wasn't wrong about the problems in our profession, he began, ignoring the uncomfortable looks from some of the assembled heroes. He was wrong about the solutions. Instead of tearing down heroes who fall short of the ideal, we need to build up the heroes who embody what we want the profession to become. And how exactly do we do that? Asked Death Arms, the hero whose agency was across the street. Community outreach that goes beyond disaster response, Izuku replied, flipping to his next diagram. Regular interaction with civilians that isn't centered on crisis situations. Programs that let heroes and civilians work together on everyday problems. Like cooking classes, Manuel asked with a slight smile. Exactly like cooking classes. Or community gardens or volunteer work at shelters, or Izuku's enthusiasm was building as he spoke. The point is that heroism shouldn't be something that only happens during emergencies. It should be a way of life that makes communities stronger even when nothing is wrong. That sounds wonderful in theory, Death Arms said skeptically, but we've got quotas to meet, rankings to maintain. The Hero Commission has specific metrics for evaluating performance. Then maybe the metrics are wrong, Izuku said simply. Maybe we're measuring the wrong things. The room fell silent. What Izuku was suggesting bordered on revolutionary, a fundamental reimagining of how hero society operated. It won't be easy, Manuel said finally. Changing systems never is, but I think the kid might be onto something. We've been so focused on being reactive that we've forgotten about being proactive. Count me in, said another voice from the back of the room. Izuku turned to see a young woman in a rescue hero costume. I've been thinking the same thing for months. Hero work shouldn't just be about responding to problems, it should be about preventing them. One by one, other heroes in the room began to nod agreement. Not all of them and not without reservations, but enough to suggest that Izuku's ideas might actually have a chance. So where do we start? Manuel asked. Izuku smiled, thinking of all the lessons Chef Sato had taught him about building community one meal at a time. We start small, he said. We start local, and we start by proving that another way is possible. Outside the window, Hasu City was rebuilding from the Namu attacks. But inside Manuel's office, a different kind of reconstruction was beginning, one that might eventually change what it meant to be a hero in their society. The cooking hero had taken his first step toward transforming not just himself, but the entire world around him. The UA campus buzzed with nervous energy as the end of the semester approached. Final exams loomed large in every student's mind, but for Class 1A, the stakes felt particularly high. After the USJ incident, the sports festival, and the internships that had scattered them across Japan, they were no longer just students. They were symbols of the next generation of heroes. Izuku sat in the cafeteria, methodically working his way through a bento box he'd prepared that morning while reviewing his notes. Around him, his classmates displayed varying levels of panic about the upcoming practical exam. "I heard it's going to be against the teachers," Kaminari said, his voice tight with anxiety. "Like actual pro heroes, how are we supposed to pass that?" "By being prepared," Iida replied, though his usual confidence seemed somewhat forced. "We've trained for this, we just need to apply what we've learned." "Easy for you to say," Minta whined. "Your quirk is actually useful in combat. Some of us are just going to get demolished." Izuku looked up from his notes, his enhanced senses picking up the stress hormones radiating from his classmates. The familiar scent of fear and anxiety filled the air, the same smell he remembered from the kitchen during Chef Sato's dinner rushes when everything was going wrong at once. "You know," he said quietly, "Chef Sato used to tell me that the worst thing you can do in a crisis is panic. Panic makes you forget everything you know." "This isn't a kitchen, Midoriya," Bakugo snorted from across the table. "This is combat." "Same principles apply," Izuku replied calmly. "In the kitchen, when orders are backing up and everything's going wrong, you have to stay calm and remember your fundamentals. Focus on what you can control, adapt to what you can't, and trust your training." Achako nodded thoughtfully. "That actually makes sense. When I was floating during the cavalry battle, I got dizzy and started panicking. That's when I made mistakes." "Exactly," Izuku said, warming to the topic. "The practical exam isn't really about having the strongest quirk or the best technique. It's about proving that you can think clearly under pressure and work effectively with others." "Speaking of working with others," Yaoyorozu interjected, "has anyone figured out how the pairing system works? I've been trying to deduce the pattern from previous year's exams." Before anyone could answer, Aizawa-sensei appeared at their table with his characteristic silent approach, causing half the students to jump. "Since you're all so curious about the practical exam," he said in his deadpan voice, "I'll save you the speculation. You'll be working in pairs against one teacher each. The pairings have been determined based on your performance assessments, personality profiles, and areas where you need improvement." He dropped a sheet of paper on the table. The class crowded around to read the pairings. "Practical exam pairings. Yaoyorozu and Todoroki versus Aizawa Midoriya and Bakugo versus All Might Iida and Ajiro versus Power Loader Takayami and Tsu versus Ectoplasm Kirishima and Sato versus Cementos Uraraka and Aoyama versus 13 Ashido, and Kaminari versus Principal Nezujiro, and Kota versus Present Mike Hagakure and Shoji versus Snipe Zero and Minta versus Midnight. The cafeteria went dead silent as everyone processed their assignments. "All Might," Bakugo's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried a mix of excitement and terror. "We're fighting All Might?" "Not fighting," Aizawa corrected. "The objective is to either immobilize your opponent or escape through the exit gate within 30 minutes. Combat is just one possible approach." Izuku stared at the paper, his mind racing. All Might, the symbol of peace, the strongest hero in the world, the man he'd idolized since childhood. And he'd be paired with Bakugo, whose explosive personality and competitive nature could either be an asset or a catastrophic liability. "This is gonna be interesting," Kirishima said, trying to lighten the mood. "Midoriya and Bakugo versus the #1 hero. Think they'll still be speaking to each other afterward." That evening, Izuku found himself in the dormitory kitchen, stress cooking his way through enough food for a small army. Dicing vegetables with mechanical precision, he tried to work through the tactical challenges of their upcoming exam. "Okay," he muttered to himself, "All Might's quirk gives him incredible strength, speed, and durability. Direct combat is obviously impossible, but the objective is escape or immobilization, not victory. So we need to think about mobility, distraction, environmental advantages." "Talking to yourself now, Deku?" Izuku looked up to find Bakugo leaning against the kitchen doorway, his usual scowl somewhat muted by what looked like genuine concern. "Just trying to figure out our strategy for tomorrow," Izuku replied, not stopping his vegetable prep. "Want some gyoza? I made way too much." "I didn't come here for food," Bakugo said, but he sat down at the counter anyway. "I came to tell you that we're gonna win this thing." "Kakin, it's All Might, even working together, especially working together," Bakugo interrupted. "Look, I know we've got history, but I'm not gonna lose because of some stupid childhood drama. You got strong, fine, I can deal with that. What I can't deal with is failing because we couldn't work as a team." Izuku paused in his cooking, genuinely surprised by Bakugo's mature approach. "You're right, we need to put everything else aside and focus on the mission." "Damn right we do." Bakugo accepted a plate of gyoza and took a bite, his eyes widening slightly at the taste. "These are, actually really good. Thanks. I've been working on the recipe." Izuku sat down across from his childhood friend, studying his expression. "Kakin, can I ask you something?" What do you think All Might's weakness is?" Bakugo nearly choked on his gyoza. "His weakness? He's All Might, he doesn't have weaknesses." "Everyone has weaknesses," Izuku said quietly. "Even All Might. I've been watching him during classes and there are things that don't add up. The way he fights sometimes, like he's conserving energy. The way he ends battles quickly instead of drawing them out. It's like he's working under some kind of time limit." "You're overthinking it," Bakugo said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "All Might is just efficient." "Maybe," Izuku agreed. "But if I'm right, if there is some kind of limitation we don't know about, that could be our key to winning." They spent the next 2 hours going over every aspect of All Might's public battles, analyzing his tactics and techniques. Despite their personal history, they worked well together, Bakugo's aggressive strategic mind complementing Izuku's analytical approach. "You know what's weird?" Bakugo said as they finally prepared to leave the kitchen. "This is the first time we've actually talked strategy together since we were kids playing heroes and villains." "Yeah," Izuku agreed. "It's nice, working together, I mean. Don't get sentimental on me, Deku. Tomorrow we fight All Might, tonight we plan, everything else can wait." The exam grounds were set up in a replica city district, complete with buildings, streets, and an exit gate at the far end. Izuku and Bakugo stood at the starting line, both wearing their full hero costumes and looking considerably more nervous than they wanted to admit. "Remember," Izuku said quietly, "the objective is escape, not combat. We just need to reach the exit gate or find a way to immobilize him for 30 seconds. "I remember," Bakugo replied, his gauntlets already warming up. "Question is, where the hell is? I am here." The declaration came from directly above them, followed immediately by All Might's massive form crashing down between them and the exit gate. Even in his teaching outfit rather than his hero costume, the #1 hero was an imposing figure. "Young Midoriya, young Bakugo," All Might's voice boomed across the practice city. "Today you face the ultimate test of your growth as heroes. Come at me with everything you've got." "Gladly," Bakugo roared, immediately launching himself forward with a massive explosion. "Die, Kakin, wait," Izuku called out, but it was too late. Bakugo was already engaging All Might in direct combat, his explosions lighting up the street as he tried to overwhelm the hero with sheer firepower. The result was predictable. All Might caught Bakugo's punch with one hand, then casually flicked him away with enough force to send him crashing through a building wall. "As expected of young Bakugo," All Might called out cheerfully. "Always direct, always passionate, but perhaps not always strategic." Izuku winced as he heard Bakugo's string of explosions and curses from inside the building. Their carefully planned strategy had lasted exactly 30 seconds before Bakugo's pride had overridden his common sense. "And what about you, young Midoriya?" All Might turned his attention to Izuku, who was hanging back near their starting position. "Will you abandon your teammate to pursue individual victory?" "Never," Izuku said firmly, his legs beginning to ignite. "We win together or we don't win at all." Instead of charging directly at All Might, Izuku used his fire-enhanced mobility to circle around the hero, heading for the building where Bakugo had landed. His enhanced senses guided him through the debris-filled interior until he found his partner, battered but not seriously injured. "Kakin, are you okay?" "I'm fine," Bakugo snapped, though he was clearly favoring his left arm. Bastard's stronger than I expected. That's what I was trying to tell you. Direct combat won't work, we need to be smarter. Then what's your brilliant plan, genius? Izuku helped Bakugo to his feet, his mind racing through their options. All Might's weakness isn't physical, it's emotional. He can't stand the thought of students getting hurt on his watch. If we can make him choose between stopping us and protecting innocent people. There are no innocent people here, Deku. It's just us and him. No, Izuku said, a grin spreading across his face. There's us, him, and about 50,000 tons of concrete and steel that could come crashing down on a populated area if someone wasn't careful about structural damage. Understanding dawned in Bakugo's eyes. You want to threaten the buildings? That's actually not completely stupid. It's not about threatening them, it's about creating a situation where All Might has to choose between capturing us and preventing a disaster. His hero instincts will always choose disaster prevention. They made their way to the top of the tallest building in the practice area, using a combination of Izuku's mobility and Bakugo's explosive propulsion. From there, they could see the entire mock city, and more importantly, All Might could see them. Young Midoriya, young Bakugo, All Might's voice carried easily across the distance. What are you planning up there? Something you're not going to like, Bakugo called back, then turned to Izuku. You sure about this? Trust me, Izuku replied. On my mark, hit the structural supports with everything you've got. Make it look like the whole building is about to come down. And then we run like hell toward the exit gate while he's busy making sure nobody gets crushed. Bakugo's explosions tore through the building's support structure with devastating efficiency, sending cracks running up the walls and filling the air with the groan of stressed metal. To any observer, it would have looked like the entire structure was moments from catastrophic collapse. All Might's response was immediate and predictable. Instead of pursuing them, he began moving through the building at super speed, reinforcing critical supports and ensuring that when it did fall, it would fall safely. Go, go, go! Izuku shouted, launching himself from the roof with Bakugo close behind. They rocketed through the mock city streets, using every shortcut and back alley Izuku's enhanced spatial awareness could identify. But All Might was faster than they'd anticipated. Even while managing the building collapse, he somehow managed to intercept them 3 blocks from the exit gate. Clever strategy, the hero boomed, landing in front of them with enough force to crack the pavement. Using my protective instincts against me, very heroic thinking. Thanks for the compliment, Bakugo panted, but we're not done yet. Indeed you are not. All Might's expression grew more serious. But now you face me at full attention, no more distractions. What followed was the most intense chase sequence of Izuku's life. All Might pursued them through the mock city with relentless determination, forcing them to use every ounce of their mobility and teamwork just to stay ahead. Bakugo's explosions provided propulsion and distraction, while Izuku's analytical mind found routes and shortcuts that kept them moving toward their goal. 2 blocks, Izuku called out as they rounded another corner. We can make it? He's gaining on us, Bakugo replied, glancing back at the approaching figure of All Might. We need another plan, but it was too late. All Might appeared directly in front of them, moving faster than should have been humanly possible. For a moment, they were trapped between the hero and a dead-end alley. Then Izuku noticed something, a slight tremor in All Might's stance, a barely perceptible decrease in the intensity of his presence. The observation data he'd been collecting suddenly clicked into place. Kakin, he said quietly, trust me on this, don't attack, just wait. What, are you insane? Please. Just wait 30 seconds. Bakugo looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Izuku's voice made him hold back. They stood in the alley, facing All Might as precious seconds ticked away. Then, just as Izuku had suspected, steam began rising from All Might's body. The hero's muscular form began to deflate, and suddenly the symbol of peace was replaced by a skeletal man coughing up blood. What the hell? Bakugo breathed. Time limit, Izuku said quietly. I was right about the time limit. All Might, or rather the thin man he'd become, looked up at them with a mixture of surprise and resignation. You figured it out? Not completely, Izuku admitted, but I noticed patterns in your behavior that suggested you were operating under some kind of constraint. I just didn't know what it was. This is your real form, Bakugo asked, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. My true form, yes. All Might's voice was much softer now, lacking the booming confidence of his hero persona. The result of an old injury. I can only maintain my hero form for a limited time each day. The three of them stood in the alley for a moment, the weight of this revelation settling over them. Does this mean we win? Bakugo asked finally. All Might smiled, a genuine expression rather than his usual camaraderie grin. You discovered my greatest secret and used it to achieve your objective without ever resorting to violence against a clearly weakened opponent. I'd say that's the most heroic victory possible. Later, in the observation room where the exam was being monitored, Izuku and Bakugo sat with All Might, who had managed to return to his hero form for the debrief. I must ask you both to keep what you learned today confidential, All Might said seriously. The public's faith in the symbol of peace is crucial for maintaining social order. Of course, Izuku replied immediately. But, can I ask what happened? The injury, I mean. All Might was quiet for a long moment. A villain, someone whose power was beyond anything I'd ever faced, I won, but the cost was significant. He touched his side where his shirt hid what were clearly extensive scars. I've been living on borrowed time ever since. That's why you're teaching, Bakugo said, his usual aggression replaced by understanding. You're looking for someone to replace you. Not replace, All Might corrected. Succeed, the world will always need heroes, young Bakugo, what it won't always have is me. Izuku felt a weight settling on his shoulders that had nothing to do with his training equipment. The hero he'd idolized his entire life was mortal, vulnerable, counting down the days until he could no longer protect the people who depended on him. Sir, he said quietly, is there anything we can do? To help, I mean? All Might smiled, and for the first time since they'd met, it seemed completely genuine. You're already doing it, young Midoriya, both of you are. You're becoming the heroes this world needs. You're learning to work together despite your differences, to think strategically rather than just react with force, to put the mission above personal glory. Even Bakugo? Izuku asked with a slight grin. Hey, Bakugo protested, though there was no real heat in it. Especially young Bakugo, All Might replied seriously. His growth over the past few months has been remarkable. The young man who charged headfirst into battle at the beginning of this exam is not the same one who trusted his partner's judgment at the end. Bakugo looked uncomfortable with the praise but didn't deny it. What happens now? Izuku asked. With your condition, I mean. Now I continue teaching for as long as I'm able, All Might replied. And I trust that when the time comes for me to pass the torch, there will be heroes ready to carry it. That evening, Izuku found himself back in the dormitory kitchen, but this time he wasn't alone. Bakugo sat at the counter, working his way through a bowl of the curry Izuku had prepared while they processed the day's events. This is really good, Bakugo said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Thanks. It's one of Chef Sato's recipes. He always said that the best meals are the ones shared after a hard day. Smart guy, your mentor. Bakugo took another bite, then looked up at Izuku. About today, thanks for trusting me. And for waiting when you asked me to, I know that wasn't easy. You trusted me too, Izuku pointed out. You could have attacked All Might when he was vulnerable, but you didn't. That showed real heroic judgment. Yeah, well, Bakugo shrugged awkwardly. Didn't seem right, you know. Kicking someone when they're down isn't victory, it's just being a dick. They ate in companionable silence for a while, two childhood friends who had finally found their way back to something resembling their old friendship. Deku, Bakugo said eventually, using the old nickname but without any of its former venom. What do you think happens when All Might retires? Who takes over as the symbol of peace? Izuku considered the question seriously. I don't think anyone can replace All Might. He's unique, but I think maybe that's okay. Maybe instead of one symbol of peace, we need a whole generation of heroes who understand what peace really means. Cheesy as hell, Bakugo observed. But probably right. Besides, Izuku added with a grin, All Might didn't become the symbol of peace overnight. He had help training people who believed in him. If any of us are going to reach that level, we'll need each other. Even me, Bakugo asked. And there was something vulnerable in the question that reminded Izuku of the boy he'd known before quirks and competition had come between them. Especially you, Kakin, you've got the power, the determination, and now you're learning the teamwork skills. With the right support system, you could become an incredible hero. Bakugo was quiet for a long moment. Then, same goes for you, Kitchen Fire. You've got something most heroes don't. You actually understand what you're fighting for. Not just the fighting part, but the protecting part. The caring part? Outside the dormitory windows, the sun was setting over UA Academy, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Inside, two young heroes were learning that strength came not just from individual power, but from the bonds they forged with each other. The practical exam was over, but in many ways their real education was just beginning. The bus wound its way through the mountains toward the Pussycats training facility, filled with the excited chatter of Class 1A students finally getting a break from regular coursework. Izuku sat near the middle of the bus, a cooler bag at his feet containing snacks he'd prepared for the 3-day journey. "I can't believe we get to train in the mountains," Achako said, bouncing slightly in her seat. "It'll be like a camping trip designed to push us to our absolute limits," Iida corrected, though he looked equally excited. "According to my research, the Wild Pussycats are known for their intensive physical conditioning programs. Whatever it is, it's gotta be better than Aizawa-sensei's regular training," Kaminari added. "At least we'll have fresh air and nature instead of that underground gym." Izuku smiled at his classmates' enthusiasm, but part of his mind was elsewhere. Ever since the practical exams and All Might's revelation about his time limit, he'd been thinking more and more about what it meant to be a hero. The sports festival had shown him he could compete with the best of his generation. The internships had taught him about community heroism, and the final exams had proven he could work with even his most difficult teammate. But there was still something missing, some crucial understanding he hadn't quite grasped yet. "Midoriya," Todoroki's voice interrupted his thoughts. "You've been quiet. Everything all right?" "Just thinking," Izuku replied. "About growth, I guess. How we keep getting stronger, but there's always another level to reach." "That's very philosophical," Yaoyorozu observed. "Though I suppose that's natural for someone whose quirk is built around nourishment and care rather than just combat." Before Izuku could respond, the bus lurched to a sudden stop. Through the windows, they could see they were at a scenic overlook with a beautiful view of the forest valley below. And standing outside the bus were two women in cat-themed hero costumes. "Attention, UA students," called the blonde woman, her voice carrying easily through the bus walls. "I'm Pixie Bob of the Wild Pussycats. Time for your first test." The students began filing off the bus, excitement mixing with nervousness as they took in their surroundings. The overlook was impressive, but more importantly, Izuku's enhanced senses were picking up something else: the scent of the forest below, rich with life and possibility. "Welcome to the start of your summer training camp," announced the other pussycat, a woman with long brown hair. "I'm Mandalay. You have until noon tomorrow to reach our facility at the base of the mountain." "Tomorrow," Zero squeaked. "But that's got to be miles." 8 miles through untamed wilderness, to be exact," Pixie Bob said cheerfully. "Oh, and did I mention the forest is full of earth monsters that I control?" "Have fun." Before any of the students could protest, Pixie Bob slammed her hands against the ground. The earth beneath their feet began to crumble, and suddenly the entire class was sliding down the mountainside toward the forest below. "This is not what I expected," Iida called out as he tumbled through the air. "Welcome to hero training," Izuku called back, already angling his body to land safely using his fire-enhanced mobility. "Remember, it's not about the destination, it's about how you grow along the way." The forest was unlike anything Izuku had ever experienced. His enhanced senses were almost overwhelmed by the sheer abundance of life. Every tree, every flower, every blade of grass contributing to a symphony of scents and sounds that painted an incredibly detailed picture of the ecosystem around them. "Stay together," Iida called out as the class regrouped after their tumultuous arrival. "We should move as a unit through unknown terrain." "Agreed," Todoroki said, ice already forming around his right hand as he prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. "But we should also be ready for—" His words were cut off by a rumbling from deeper in the forest. Through the trees came lumbering a massive creature made of earth and stone, easily 3 times the height of a person, with glowing eyes that seemed to fix directly on their group. Earth monster, Yaoyorozu called out, already creating a bow staff from her torso. Everyone, combat formation, but as the creature charged toward them, Izuku held up a hand. Wait. Look at it more carefully. The monster was indeed massive and intimidating, but Izuku's analytical mind was picking up details his classmates were missing. The way it moved was more playful than aggressive. Its attacks, while spectacular, were aimed to hurt rather than harm. Even its roars sounded more like challenges than threats. It's a test, he realized, not just of our combat abilities, but of how we work together under pressure. Then let's show it what Class 1A can do, Kirishima said, hardening his skin as he charged forward. What followed was a chaotic but increasingly coordinated battle, as the students learned to work together against their earthen opponent. Bakugo's explosions provided raw firepower, Todoroki's ice created barriers and tactical advantages, while Izuku used his fire-enhanced mobility to scout and coordinate their efforts. Takami have dark shadow flank left. Yaoyorozu, we need something to bind its legs. Achako, can you make it a weightless for a high-speed attack? The battle became less about individual heroics and more about seamless teamwork. Each student played to their strengths while covering their classmates' weaknesses, and gradually the earth monster began to slow down under their coordinated assault. Finally, with a rumbling sigh that sounded almost satisfied, the creature crumbled back into ordinary dirt and stone. First test passed, came Pixie Bob's voice from somewhere in the forest. But that was just the warm-up. Keep moving if you want to reach dinner before midnight. As they made their way deeper into the forest, the tests came one after another. Earth monsters of different sizes and configurations, environmental challenges that required creative use of their quirks, and puzzles that could only be solved through cooperation. But what struck Izuku most was how the experience was changing his classmates. Away from the structure of school and the pressure of grades, they were becoming something more than just individual students. They were becoming a team. Midoriya, Tsu said as they took a brief rest by a stream, that bag you've been carrying, it's not just survival gear, is it? Izuku smiled and opened his pack to reveal an assortment of energy bars, electrolyte drinks, and quick preparation meals. I figured we'd get hungry and tired during whatever they had planned. Food is fuel, and we need to stay fueled to perform at our best. You made all of this? Sato asked, accepting one of the energy bars with obvious gratitude. When did you have time? Last night after we got the camp announcement. Chef Sato always taught me that taking care of your team is part of being a leader. Is that what you think you are? Bakugo asked, though his tone was more curious than confrontational. Our leader? Izuku considered the question as he distributed food to his tired classmates. I think we all lead in different ways. You lead through determination and never giving up. Ida leads through organization and keeping us focused. Yaoyorozu leads through strategic thinking. I guess I lead by making sure everyone has what they need to be their best. That's a very mature way of looking at leadership, Yaoyorozu said thoughtfully. Most people think of it in terms of giving orders or being the strongest. Strength comes in a lot of forms, Izuku replied, watching his classmates regain their energy as they ate. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is make sure everyone else feels strong enough to keep going. As the afternoon wore on and the challenges continued, Izuku found himself naturally falling into a support role. Not the combat support he'd trained for, but something deeper, anticipating what his classmates needed before they knew they needed it, creating opportunities for others to shine, making sure no one was left behind. You know, Kirishima said as they faced down their fifth Earth monster of the day, this is way more fun than I expected. It's like we're a real hero team instead of just classmates. We are a real hero team, Izuku replied, his legs igniting as he prepared to launch his next attack. We just needed the right situation to figure that out. They reached the Wild Pussycats facility just as the sun was setting, exhausted but triumphant. The main building was a rustic lodge that seemed to blend seamlessly with the forest around it, and the smell of cooking food drifted from its windows. Welcome, UA students, Mandalay greeted them at the entrance. You made good time, only 3 hours behind our best-case scenario. 3 hours, Kaminari groaned. We've been hiking for 8 hours, which means you have room for improvement, Pixie Bob added cheerfully. But first, dinner and rest. Training starts bright and early tomorrow. As they filed into the lodge, Izuku was struck by how comfortable and welcoming it felt. This wasn't just a training facility, it was a home, a place where heroes were nurtured and developed rather than just tested. "Impressive work today," said a new voice. They turned to see a small boy, maybe 5 years old, peeking around the corner with curious eyes. "Kota," Mandalay called out. "Come meet the students." The boy Kota approached reluctantly, his expression guarded. Izuku's enhanced senses picked up something familiar about his emotional state, the particular kind of pain that came from loss mixed with anger and fear. "I don't like heroes," Kota announced bluntly, causing several students to look shocked. "That's okay," Izuku said gently, kneeling down to Kota's eye level. "You don't have to like us, but would you like some cookies? I made them for the trip, but I think I made too many." Kota's eyes widened slightly at the unexpected response. "You made cookies?" "Chocolate chip," Izuku confirmed, pulling a container from his pack. "My mentor taught me that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is share something sweet with someone who's having a hard day." For a moment, Kota's defensive facade cracked, revealing the hurt child underneath. He accepted a cookie with small, careful hands, and his eyes went wide at the taste. "These are really good," he admitted quietly. "I'm glad you like them. There are plenty more if you want seconds." As the evening progressed and the students settled in for dinner, Izuku found himself thinking about Kota's words. The boy's rejection of heroes wasn't just casual dislike, it was deep, personal pain. Someone he'd cared about had been hurt, probably killed, and heroes had failed to prevent it. It was a reminder that not everyone saw heroes the way he did. For some people, heroes represented hope and protection, but for others, they represented failure, the symbol of a system that hadn't been there when it mattered most. Late that night, Izuku found himself unable to sleep. The day's events had left him energized rather than exhausted, his mind racing with thoughts about teamwork, leadership, and the different ways people saw heroism. He made his way to the lodge's kitchen, intending to prepare some late-night snacks for his classmates, when he found Kota sitting alone at the large wooden table, staring out the window at the forest. "Can't sleep either?" Izuku asked gently. Kota startled, then relaxed when he saw who it was. "I don't sleep much," he said quietly. "Too many nightmares. Want to talk about it? You wouldn't understand." "You're a hero?" Izuku sat down across from Kota, his expression thoughtful. "You know, my mentor used to be a hero too. He lost his leg fighting a villain, had to retire. For a while, he was really angry at the hero system, felt like it had failed him." Kota looked up with interest despite himself. "But then he realized something," Izuku continued. "Being angry at heroes for not being perfect was like being angry at doctors for not being able to cure every disease. They do their best, but they're still human. They make mistakes, they have limitations, and sometimes people get hurt despite their best efforts." "My parents were heroes," Kota said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "They died fighting a villain. The other heroes said they were brave, that they saved people. But they didn't save me from being alone." Izuku felt his heart break a little at the pain in the boy's voice. "I'm sorry, that must hurt so much. Everyone keeps telling me I should be proud of them, that they were heroes. But I'd rather have them back." "Of course you would," Izuku said simply. "That's not selfish or wrong, that's love. You love your parents more than you love the idea of heroism, and there's nothing wrong with that." Kota looked surprised by the validation. "Can I tell you something my mentor taught me?" Izuku asked. "He said that the most important thing about being a hero isn't the fighting or the rescuing or the fame. It's understanding that every person you save is someone's whole world. Every life you protect is someone's parent, child, friend, or partner. But they still die sometimes." "Yes," Izuku agreed quietly, "they do. And when that happens, it's not because heroes don't care or because they didn't try hard enough. It's because the world is complicated and dangerous, and sometimes bad things happen despite everyone's best efforts." Kota was quiet for a long moment. "The other heroes, they keep trying to cheer me up, tell me my parents would want me to smile. What do you think your parents would want? For me to be safe, to be happy, to not have to worry about villain attacks and hero fights and all of that stuff." "Then maybe that's your answer," Izuku said. Maybe the best way to honor their memory isn't to become a hero or to love heroes, but to live the kind of safe, happy life they wanted to give you. You really think that? I think that love looks different for different people. Some people honor their loved ones by following in their footsteps. Others honor them by choosing a completely different path. Both are valid. Kota nodded slowly, some of the tension leaving his small shoulders. But, Izuku added with a gentle smile, if you ever do want to talk about heroes or quirks or anything else, I'm here. Not as a hero in training, but as someone who understands that the world is complicated and sometimes scary. Thanks, Kota said quietly. And thanks for the cookies, they were really good. I'll make more tomorrow if you want. My mentor always said that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is make sure someone has a good meal and knows they're not alone. The next morning brought intensive training that pushed every student to their limits. Izuku found himself working on enhancing his fire-based attacks, trying to achieve the blue flames he'd managed once before during the Overhaul incident. Focus on the emotion behind the flame, Pixie Bob called out as he practiced. Fire quirks are always tied to the user's emotional state. Izuku concentrated, thinking about protection, about his desire to keep his friends safe, about the responsibility he felt toward people like Kota who had been hurt by the failures of the hero system. Gradually, his orange flames began to shift toward blue, burning hotter and more controlled than ever before. Excellent progress, Mandalay observed. You're learning to channel your protective instincts into power, but even as he trained, part of Izuku's mind was elsewhere. There had been reports of increased villain activity in the area, and his enhanced senses had been picking up traces of unfamiliar scents around the facility's perimeter. Nothing concrete enough to report, but enough to keep him on edge. His instincts proved correct just after sunset when the peaceful evening was shattered by Mandalay's telepathic voice echoing in every student's mind. Everyone, 2 villains have attacked, they're professionals, students should not engage. Find shelter immediately. Chaos erupted as students scattered in all directions, some seeking shelter as instructed, others moving toward the fight despite the warnings. Izuku found himself torn between following orders and his growing sense that something was terribly wrong. The decision was made for him when he saw a familiar figure moving through the trees, Toga, the blood-manipulating villain from the League of Villains, her knife gleaming in the moonlight as she stalked toward the main lodge. Damn, he breathed, his legs already igniting. His quirk's moral imperatives made it difficult to fight women, but he couldn't let her reach the younger students or Kota. Toga, he called out, deliberately drawing her attention to himself. Remember me from the training camp attack? She turned toward him with that unsettling smile, her golden eyes bright with excitement. Izuku, I was hoping we'd meet again. You smell so interesting when you're trying to be heroic. I won't let you hurt anyone here, Izuku said firmly, positioning himself between her and the lodge. Oh, but I don't want to hurt them, Toga giggled, spinning her knife playfully. I want to hurt you, you're so pretty when you're trying to protect people. The fight that followed was unlike any Izuku had experienced. Toga was fast, unpredictable, and seemed to take genuine pleasure in the violence. But more challenging than her physical abilities was the way she exploited his quirk's limitations. Every time he hesitated, every moment when his moral code prevented him from going all out against a female opponent, she pressed her advantage. Her knife found its mark repeatedly, small cuts that drew blood and fed her quirk's power. You're holding back, she laughed as they danced around each other in the moonlight. That's what makes you so interesting. You could probably beat me if you really tried, but you won't. It's like you're choosing to lose. And she was right. Despite the danger, despite the threat she posed to innocent people, Izuku found himself pulling his punches, using environmental attacks instead of direct force, trying to incapacitate rather than seriously harm. It was only when he heard Kota scream from the direction of the lodge that something inside him snapped. The sight that greeted Izuku when he reached the lodge was his worst nightmare realized. Muscular, a massive villain with a strength enhancement quirk, had cornered Kota on a rocky outcrop behind the building. The small boy was pressed against the stone wall, tears streaming down his face as the villain advanced. Found you, little hero hater, Muscular laughed, his voice carrying easily across the distance. Guess what? I'm the one who killed your hero parents, and now I'm gonna finish the job. Time seemed to slow as Izuku watched Kota's face crumple with terror and despair. In that moment, all of his moral complexities, all of his limitations and hesitations were burned away by a single, pure emotion: the absolute need to protect an innocent child. "Get away from him!" Izuku roared, launching himself toward the villain with everything he had. The flames that erupted from his legs weren't the orange fire of his normal attacks or even the blue flames he'd been practicing. They were something beyond both. A brilliant white blue that turned the night to day and carried with it all of his fury at villains who would hurt children, all of his determination to be the hero Kota needed, all of his love for the people he was sworn to protect. His kick connected with Muscular's torso with the force of a small explosion, launching the massive villain clear across the mountainside. The villain hit the rocks with a sickening crunch, then lay still. "Are you okay?" Izuku asked immediately, dropping down beside Kota. "Did he hurt you?" Kota stared up at him with wide eyes, seeming to see him clearly for the first time. You saved me." "Of course I did. That's what heroes do." "But I said I hated heroes. You said you were hurting," Izuku corrected gently, his flames fading as the immediate danger passed. "And I said I understood. That didn't change just because you were in danger." Kota threw his arms around Izuku's waist in a fierce hug, sobbing against his hero costume. I'm sorry, I said I hated heroes. You're not like the others." "I'm exactly like the others," Izuku said quietly, returning the hug. "We all just want to protect people. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we fail, but we never stop trying." "Will you teach me?" Kota asked suddenly. "About being a hero, not to become one, but just to understand." "I'd be honored to," Izuku replied. "But first, let's get you somewhere safe. The night isn't over yet." As they made their way back toward the lodge, Izuku could see other battles raging across the facility grounds. His classmates were fighting for their lives against professional villains, and despite their training, they were outmatched. But they were also learning something that couldn't be taught in a classroom: what it really meant to be a hero when everything was on the line. By dawn, the attack was over. The League of Villains had been repelled, though not without cost. Several students were injured, the facility was damaged, and most importantly, Bakugo was missing, taken by the villains in the chaos of battle. Izuku sat on the lodge's porch, his hands shaking as the adrenaline finally wore off. Kota sat beside him, no longer the angry, hurt child from the day before, but not quite ready to fully embrace heroism either. "It's my fault," Izuku said quietly. "Kaken got taken because I wasn't strong enough, wasn't fast enough to protect everyone." "That's not true," Kota said firmly. "You saved me. You stopped that scary man from hurting anyone else. You can't save everyone all the time, that's what you taught me, remember?" Izuku looked down at the boy, surprised by the wisdom in his words. "Besides," Kota continued, "your friend. Bakugo, he's strong, right? And the other heroes will save him, that's what heroes do." "Yeah," Izuku agreed, feeling some of his guilt begin to ease. "That's what heroes do." As rescue teams arrived and began coordinating the response to the attack, Izuku found himself thinking about the night's events. He'd achieved a new level of power with his flames, proven that he could overcome his moral limitations when innocent lives were at stake, and helped a hurting child begin to heal. But the price had been Bakugo's capture, and that knowledge weighed heavily on his heart. "Midoriya," Aizawa's voice interrupted his thoughts. "You did well tonight, your actions saved lives. But Kaken will be rescued," Aizawa said firmly, "by professional heroes with the resources and authority to handle this situation. Your job right now is to recover, learn from what happened, and prepare for whatever comes next." "What does come next?" Aizawa was quiet for a moment, looking out at the damaged facility. "Growth," he said finally, "for all of you. This attack wasn't random. The League specifically targeted this training camp, specifically went after your class. That means the stakes are getting higher." "Are we ready for that?" "You're getting there," Aizawa replied. "Tonight proved that you can rise to meet a crisis when it matters, but there's still room for improvement." As the sun climbed higher into the sky, casting long shadows across the mountain facility, Izuku felt a familiar determination settling into his bones. Bakugo was out there somewhere in the hands of villains who wanted to use him for their own purposes. But he wouldn't be alone for long, because that's what heroes did, they saved each other no matter the cost. The cooking hero had learned to fight with white-hot flames when protecting the innocent. Now he would learn what it meant to burn with the fire of rescue, no matter how dangerous the kitchen became. The rescue operation to save Bakugo had ended in both triumph and tragedy. All Might's final battle against All for One had been broadcast across the world, showing the symbol of peace's true form as he defeated his greatest enemy and announced his retirement in the same moment. Now, 3 weeks later, Izuku found himself in an unexpected place. The basement kitchen of a homeless shelter in downtown Musutafu, working alongside his new workstudy supervisor, Sir Naitai. "I don't understand," Izuku said as he efficiently diced vegetables for the evening meal service. "Why are we here instead of patrolling or investigating villains?" Sir Naitai adjusted his glasses, his expression characteristically serious. "Tell me, Midoriya, what do you know about the Shai Hasekai? The Yakuza group? I know they've been expanding their territory lately, but I thought that was a police matter." "On the surface, yes. But my investigation suggests they're involved in something much more sinister." Naitai began preparing rice with mechanical precision. "Drug manufacturing, possibly human trafficking. And the best way to infiltrate a criminal organization isn't through dramatic raids, it's through understanding the communities they exploit." Izuku paused in his chopping, his enhanced senses picking up the deeper meaning behind Naitai's words. "You think they're recruiting from vulnerable populations, people who are desperate enough to work for criminals?" "Exactly, and what better place to understand those vulnerabilities than a shelter that serves the people most likely to be targeted?" As if summoned by their conversation, Mirio Tagada's cheerful voice echoed down the stairs. "Hey everyone, how's dinner prep going?" "Tagada-senpai," Izuku looked up as his senior joined them in the kitchen. "I thought you were handling the intake interviews upstairs, just finished." And guess what? 3 of the new residents mentioned seeing kids hanging around the old industrial district. Kids who shouldn't be out that late, if you know what I mean. Naitai's expression darkened. "Child trafficking? Or worse," Mirio replied, his usual cheerfulness fading. "But hey, that's why we're here, right? To help people who can't help themselves." Izuku found himself nodding, understanding finally clicking into place. This wasn't just community service or information gathering, it was heroism at its most fundamental level. They were building trust with people who had been failed by the system, creating a network of support that could identify problems before they became catastrophes. "Midoriya," Naitai said as they continued their prep work, "I've reviewed your file extensively. Your mentor, this Chef Sato, seems to have understood something that many professional heroes miss." "What's that?" "That heroism isn't just about responding to crises, it's about preventing them. Every person we feed tonight is someone who won't be desperate enough to work for criminals. Every conversation we have is intelligence gathering that could save lives down the line. Plus," Mirio added with a grin, "your cooking is making this place more popular than it's ever been. Word spreading that the new UA intern makes restaurant-quality meals. People are coming here who might have gone hungry otherwise." As the dinner service began and hungry people filed through the shelter's dining room, Izuku felt a familiar warmth in his chest. This was what Chef Sato had been trying to teach him. That strength came not just from physical power, but from the connections you built with others. That evening, as they cleaned up after serving nearly 200 people, Izuku's enhanced senses picked up something troubling. A young girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, had been brought in by a nervous-looking man who claimed to be her father. But the sense clinging to her, fear, exhaustion, and something medicinal that didn't belong on a healthy child, told a different story. "Naitai-san," he said quietly, "the girl at table 7, something's wrong." "Elaborate." "She smells like a hospital, but not the clean kind, more like a laboratory. And she's terrified but trying to hide it." Naitai followed his gaze to where the small girl sat picking at her food while the man beside her watched her with unsettling intensity. "Eerie," Mirio said softly, having overheard their conversation. "That's what he called her, said she was sick and needed special medicine. Medicine that makes a child smell like a chemistry lab." Izuku's legs were beginning to warm with barely contained fire. "That doesn't sound like treatment, that sounds like experimentation." Before Naitai could respond, the man stood up abruptly, grabbing Erie's arm with unnecessary force. "Come on. We need to go? Wait, Izuku called out, approaching their table with a friendly smile that didn't reach his eyes. She barely touched her food. Are you sure she's not hungry? The man's grip on Eri tightened. She's fine. She has a delicate stomach. But Eri looked up at Izuku with eyes that held far too much pain for someone so young, and he saw her mouth a single, silent word. Help! Something inside Izuku's chest ignited, not the physical fire of his quirk, but something deeper and more dangerous. The same protective fury that had driven him to white-hot flames when Kota was threatened. You know, he said conversationally, his voice carrying just a hint of steel, I'm actually pretty good with delicate stomachs. My mentor taught me to cook for people with all kinds of dietary restrictions. Maybe I could make her something special? That won't be necessary, the man replied curtly. We're leaving. Actually, Sir Nightai appeared beside them, his presence somehow filling the space with quiet authority. I'm afraid we need to ask you a few questions first. Standard procedure for anyone bringing children to the shelter. The man's eyes darted toward the exit, calculating distances. Questions about what? About why a supposedly sick child smells like she's been exposed to industrial chemicals, Izuku said quietly, dropping all pretense of friendliness. About why she's more afraid of you than she is of strangers. About why someone claiming to be her father doesn't know that she's left-handed but keeps trying to feed her with her right hand. Eri's eyes went wide at being so thoroughly understood by someone she'd just met. I don't know what you're implying, the man said, but his free hand was already moving toward something concealed in his jacket. I'm implying, Izuku replied, his legs beginning to glow with heat, that you're not her father and this isn't medicine, and if you try to leave with her, you're going to discover just how hot my flames can burn. The confrontation in the shelter led to the man's arrest and Eri's protective custody, but it also opened a door into something much larger and more horrifying than any of them had imagined. The Shy Hasekai weren't just manufacturing drugs, they were manufacturing them using a little girl's blood and flesh, repeatedly destroying and rebuilding her body to harvest the quirk-destroying bullets they were creating. It's monstrous, Mirio said as they sat in Night Eye's office reviewing the intelligence they'd gathered. Using a child like that, what kind of person could do something so evil? Someone who's forgotten that quirks come from people, Izuku replied, his hands clenched into fists. Someone who sees her as a resource instead of a human being. The man we arrested was just a foot soldier, Knight explained, his expression grim. But he's given us enough information to understand the scope of the operation. Kai Chisaki, known as Overhaul, has been systematically torturing this child to mass-produce weapons designed to destroy what makes heroes heroic. Then we stop him, Izuku said simply. We rescue Eri and shut down the operation. It won't be simple, Knight, I warned. Overhaul is dangerous, his organization is well-funded and heavily armed, and they have the home field advantage. This will require careful planning and coordination with multiple hero agencies. How long will that take? Weeks, maybe months. These things can't be rushed if we want to. She doesn't have weeks, Izuku interrupted, his voice carrying an edge that made both older heroes pause. Every day we spend planning is another day they're hurting her. Another day she's being torn apart and put back together for their profit. Midoriya, Night Eye's tone carried a warning. I understand your emotional investment in this case, but heroes must act strategically, not impulsively. This isn't impulse, Izuku replied, standing up from his chair. This is urgency. There's a difference between being careful and being paralyzed by overthinking. What are you suggesting? Izuku looked between his mentor and his senior, his mind already working through possibilities. I'm suggesting that while you coordinate the official response, I gather more intelligence. Overhaul doesn't know me personally. I might be able to get closer to their operation than a known pro-hero could. Absolutely not, Night Eye said immediately. You're not ready for that level of undercover work. Maybe not, Izuku agreed, but I'm ready to do whatever it takes to save a little girl who asked me for help. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken understanding. This wasn't just about Eri anymore, it was about the kind of hero Izuku was choosing to become. 3 days later, Izuku found himself in the kitchen of a restaurant that served as a front for Shy Hasekai money laundering operations. His cover story was simple: a culinary student looking for part-time work, willing to work cheap and ask no questions. The irony wasn't lost on him that his path to infiltrating a criminal organization led through a kitchen. "You're good with a knife," observed the restaurant's head chef, a nervous man who clearly knew more about his employer's true business than he was comfortable with. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" "My mentor," Izuku replied truthfully as he prepared vegetables with surgical precision. "He taught me that cooking is about understanding what people need and providing it." "Smart man. In this business, it's better to give people what they want without asking too many questions about where the money comes from." Izuku nodded noncommittally while his enhanced senses cataloged every detail of the restaurant's operation. The way certain customers were escorted to back rooms for private meetings, the smell of chemicals that had nothing to do with cooking coming from the basement, the tension that filled the air whenever certain names were mentioned. "Chef," he said during a lull in service, "I noticed we get a lot of deliveries that don't seem food-related. Medical supplies, chemistry equipment. Is this place part of some kind of research facility?" The head chef went pale. "Kid, let me give you some advice. The best way to keep working here is to focus on the cooking and pretend you don't notice anything else. The people who run this place, they don't like curious employees." That night, Izuku made his way carefully through the restaurant's basement, using his enhanced senses to navigate in the dark. What he found confirmed his worst fears. A full-scale laboratory setup, complete with medical equipment, chemical synthesis stations, and storage for what looked like hundreds of quirk-destroying bullets. But more importantly, he found evidence of Irie's presence. Blood samples labeled with her name, medical charts tracking her regeneration cycles, and worst of all, a small room that had clearly been designed to contain a child. "This ends now," he whispered to himself, his legs beginning to glow with barely contained fire. The raid on the Shai Hasekai compound happened sooner than Night Eye had planned, forced by Izuku's discovery that they were preparing to move Irie to a new location. Multiple hero agencies coordinated a simultaneous assault on several facilities, with Izuku, Mirio, and Night Eye assigned to the main compound where intelligence suggested Irie was being held. "Remember," Night Eye said as they approached the building, "our primary objective is rescue, not revenge. We get the girl and get out." "Understood," Izuku replied, though his flames were already beginning to dance around his legs. The thought of Irie's suffering while they spoke was almost unbearable. The compound's interior was a maze of corridors and rooms that seemed to shift and change as they moved through it, courtesy of Overhaul's matter manipulation quirk. What should have been a straightforward rescue became a nightmarish puzzle where walls became floors and floors became ceilings. "Stay together," Mirio called out as they navigated the constantly changing architecture. "If we get separated in here—" His words were cut off as a wall suddenly shot up between them, dividing the team and leaving Izuku alone in a corridor that hadn't existed moments before. "Clever little hero," came a voice from the shadows. Kaichisaki stepped into view, his white coat pristine despite the chaos around them, his golden eyes cold with contempt. "Did you really think you could infiltrate my operation without me noticing?" "I wasn't trying to be subtle," Izuku replied, his legs igniting with blue flames. "I was trying to gather evidence." "Mission accomplished." "Evidence of what?" "A legitimate medical research facility working to cure quirk-related disabilities. Evidence of child abuse, human experimentation, and weapons manufacturing," Izuku shot back. "Irie isn't a research subject. She's a little girl who deserves to be safe and happy." Overhaul's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "That girl is the key to returning the world to its natural state. Before quirks corrupted humanity, before people became dependent on these unnatural abilities." "Quirks aren't corruption," Izuku said firmly. "They're part of what makes us human. And using a child's suffering to fuel your philosophy makes you a monster, not a revolutionary." "Monster?" Overhaul's voice carried genuine amusement. "I'm trying to save the world from the disease of quirks and you call me a monster. What does that make you, little hero? What does that make your precious quirk society?" The philosophical debate might have continued, but it was interrupted by a small, frightened voice from deeper in the compound. "Help me. Someone please help me." Irie. She was close and she was terrified. Izuku's response was immediate and devastating. The flames around his legs exploded into the brilliant white-blue he'd achieved during the training camp, but this time they didn't stop there. Fueled by his fury at child abuse, his determination to protect the innocent, and his absolute refusal to let anyone else suffer while he had the power to prevent it, his flames turned a color that had no name, something beyond blue, beyond white, beyond anything he'd ever achieved before. "Get out of my way," he said quietly, and his voice carried the promise of absolute destruction for anyone who stood between him and the child who needed his help. The battle with Overhaul was unlike anything in Izuku's experience. The villain's matter manipulation quirk turned the environment into a constantly shifting weapon, creating spikes and barriers and traps from the very floor beneath their feet. But Izuku had advantages Overhaul hadn't counted on. His enhanced senses let him predict structural changes before they happened, reading the villain's intentions in the minute vibrations that preceded each attack. His fire-enhanced mobility kept him ahead of the shifting architecture, and his analytical mind found patterns in the chaos. Most importantly, he had something Overhaul didn't: a reason to fight that went beyond philosophy or personal gain. "You can't understand," Overhaul snarled as they battled through the compound's twisting corridors. "You're too young, too naive. The world was better before quirks, cleaner. More pure. I don't care about your vision of purity," Izuku replied, his flames burning so hot they left scorch marks on the walls. "I care about a little girl who's been hurt enough. She's not being hurt, she's being used. For the greater good, to save humanity. From what? From the incredible diversity of abilities that make people special, from the heroes who use their gifts to help others." Izuku's flames grew brighter with each word. "You're not saving humanity, you're trying to force it back into a smaller, simpler box because you're afraid of complexity." The turning point came when they finally reached the chamber where Eri was being held. The little girl was strapped to a medical table, IV lines running from her small arms to machines that Izuku didn't want to understand. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow, and she looked more like a ghost than a living child. "You see," Overhaul said, gesturing to the setup as if it were a masterpiece. "Efficient, clean, no waste. She regenerates, we extract what we need, everyone benefits." "Everyone except her," Izuku whispered, and the flames around his body erupted into an inferno that filled the entire chamber. What followed wasn't a battle, it was an execution of justice. Overhaul, for all his power and philosophy, couldn't stand against the fury of someone who had dedicated his life to protecting others. Izuku's enhanced kicks, powered by flames that burned hotter than any normal fire, overwhelmed the villain's defenses and left him broken on the floor. "It's over," Izuku said quietly, his flames finally beginning to fade as he rushed to Eri's side. "You're safe now, I'm going to get you out of here." Eri's eyes fluttered open, focusing on his face with difficulty. Are you really here, or is this another dream?" "I'm really here," Izuku said gently, carefully removing the medical equipment that had been tormenting her. "And I'm going to make sure no one ever hurts you again." "Promise?" "I promise," Izuku replied, lifting her carefully in his arms. "That's what heroes do, we keep our promises to protect people." 2 weeks later, Izuku sat in the common room of the UA dormitory, watching Eri color at the coffee table while his classmates went about their evening routines. The little girl was staying at the school temporarily while the authorities figured out her long-term care, and she had slowly begun to open up to the world around her. "Izuku," she said without looking up from her drawing, "why do you cook for everyone?" "What do you mean?" "Every day you make food for your friends. Even when they don't ask." "Why?" Izuku considered the question seriously. "I guess because taking care of people makes them stronger. When people know someone cares about them, they can be braver, kinder, more themselves." "Is that why you saved me?" "Because you care about people?" "I saved you because you asked for help and I couldn't ignore that, but yes, I care about you. We all do." Eri looked around the common room where Achako was helping Ida with homework, Todoroki was reading quietly in a corner, and Bakugo was aggressively playing video games with Kirishima. "They're your family," she observed. "In a way, yes, we chose each other and we take care of each other, that's what families do." Could I be part of your family too? Maybe." Izuku felt his chest tighten with emotion. "Eri, you already are. From the moment you asked me for help, you became part of our family, and families protect each other. Even when it's scary." Especially when it's scary, Izuku replied, thinking of all the battles they'd fought, all the times they'd risked everything for each other. Being a hero isn't about not being scared, it's about caring more about others than you do about your own fear. I think I understand, Eri said, returning to her coloring. You burn bright because you love people. That's actually a pretty good way to put it. As the evening wore on and his classmates gradually headed to bed, Izuku found himself thinking about how much had changed since he'd first arrived at UA. He'd grown stronger, learned to work with others, discovered new depths to his own power. But most importantly, he'd learned what it truly meant to be a hero. It wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest or the most famous. It wasn't about having the flashiest quirk or the most impressive victories. It was about being someone others could count on when everything went wrong. It was about building communities where people felt safe enough to be vulnerable, strong enough to help others, and connected enough to never face their worst moments alone. Outside the dormitory windows, the lights of Musutafu twinkled in the darkness, each one representing someone who deserved to feel safe and cared for. And inside, a group of young heroes continued learning what it meant to protect that light, one shared meal and one act of kindness at a time. The cooking hero had found his true recipe for heroism: equal parts power and compassion, seasoned with unwavering determination to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Spring had returned to UA Academy, bringing with it the annual cultural festival, a celebration that felt more meaningful than ever after the year's trials and tribulations. Izuku stood in the dormitory kitchen at dawn, preparing what had become his daily ritual: breakfast for his entire class, perfectly tailored to each person's nutritional needs and preferences. "You're up early again," came a soft voice from the doorway. Eri padded into the kitchen wearing her favorite all-night pajamas, her silver hair still messy from sleep. "Someone's got to make sure everyone starts the day right," Izuku replied with a smile, not pausing in his preparation of what appeared to be enough food for a small army. "Wanna help? I could use an assistant chef." Eri's face lit up, an expression that still filled Izuku with quiet joy every time he saw it. The scared, broken child from the Overhaul compound was slowly being replaced by someone who was learning to trust the world again. "What are we making today?" she asked, climbing onto a step stool beside him. "Well, Kaken needs extra protein for his training regimen, so I'm making him a special omelet with salmon and spinach. Todoroki-kun prefers traditional Japanese breakfast, but I'm adding some Western elements to help him bridge the two sides of himself. Achako-chan needs something that'll give her sustained energy for her zero-gravity training without making her nauseous." As he explained each dish and its purpose, Eri listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed she was beginning to understand the deeper philosophy behind his cooking. "It's like you're making medicine," she observed as she watched him carefully measure spices for Iida's kanji. "But medicine that tastes good." "That's exactly right," Izuku agreed. "Chef Sato taught me that food is the first form of healing. Before quirks, before modern medicine, people took care of each other with meals made with love." "Is that why you always cook when people are sad or hurt?" Izuku paused, considering her question. Over the past months, it had become second nature for him to respond to his classmates' emotional needs through food. When Takami struggled with controlling Dark Shadow after a difficult training session, Izuku made him chamomile tea and honey cakes. When Yaoyorozu felt overwhelmed by the pressure of being class vice president, he prepared her favorite childhood comfort foods. When Bakugo had nightmares about his kidnapping, Izuku left spicy curry outside his door, never mentioning it, never making it awkward, just ensuring his friend knew someone cared. "I think," he said finally, "it's because food is a way of saying things that are sometimes hard to say out loud. Like, I'm here for you, or you're important to me, or you're going to be okay. What does breakfast say? Breakfast says, 'Good morning, I'm glad you're here and I want your day to start beautifully.'" Eri smiled, an expression so genuine and uncomplicated that it made Izuku's heart swell. This was what he fought for, not just to defeat villains, but to create moments like this, where a child who had known only pain could find simple joy in preparing food for people she cared about. The cultural festival had taken on special significance for Class 1A after everything they'd been through: the USJ attack, the training camp incident, Bakugo's kidnapping, the Overhaul raid. They needed something that celebrated life and community rather than conflict and struggle. "So it's settled," Ashido announced during their class meeting, bouncing with excitement. "We're doing a combination restaurant and performance. Izuku will handle the main cooking with help from anyone who wants to learn, and the rest of us will provide entertainment." "A restaurant?" Minta looked confused. "But we're hero students, not culinary students." "Exactly the point," Yaoyorozu said thoughtfully. "We want to show people that heroes aren't just about fighting villains. We're about building community, bringing people together, making life better for everyone." "Plus," Kirishima added with a grin, "have you tasted Midoriya's cooking? We'll probably have lines around the block." Izuku felt his cheeks warm at the praise, but also felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Feeding a few classmates was one thing, catering to potentially hundreds of festival visitors was something else entirely. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "I mean, I'm honored that you all want to do this, but it's a lot of pressure." "Which is exactly why we're all going to help," Iida declared, his hand cutting through the air with characteristic precision. "This won't be the Midoriya show, it will be a true class collaboration. I can handle the books and inventory management," Yaoyorozu offered. "My family's business experience should be useful." "I'll design the promotional materials," Kaminari volunteered. "Something eye-catching that really shows our class spirit." "Count me in for prep work," Bakugo said gruffly. "Someone's gotta make sure you don't poison half the school with your experimental recipes." Even Todoroki, typically reserved about class activities, stepped forward. "I'd like to help with cooking. My father's household staff taught me some techniques that might be useful." Looking around at his classmates, his family, really, Izuku felt that familiar warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with his quirk. This was what community looked like, people choosing to work together not because they had to, but because they wanted to create something beautiful. "All right," he said, his voice growing stronger with conviction. "Let's do this. Let's show the world what heroes can accomplish when we work together." The weeks leading up to the festival were a masterclass in organized chaos. The Class 1A common room had been transformed into a planning center, with schedules, supply lists, and recipe cards covering every available surface. Students who had never shown interest in cooking found themselves learning knife skills, while others discovered hidden talents for customer service and event management. "Midoriya," Takayami said during one of their evening prep sessions, "I must ask, how do you manage to create dishes that seem perfectly suited to each person's individual needs?" Izuku looked up from where he was teaching Shiro how to properly fold dumplings. "It's about understanding people, I think. Paying attention to what makes them happy, what they need for energy, what comforts them when they're stressed. Cooking is just another form of communication." "It's more than that," Achako said from across the room where she was practicing her hostess smile. "You see things about people that they don't even see about themselves. Remember when you made those special energy bars for Kaminari that helped him manage his quirk overuse symptoms? He'd never even mentioned that problem to you. Or when you figured out that Jiru was feeling homesick and made her mom's exact recipe for miso soup," Tsu added. "Right down to the specific type of seaweed her family uses." "That's just observation," Izuku protested, though his cheeks were pink. "Anyone could—" "No," Bakugo interrupted, not looking up from the vegetables he was aggressively but precisely dicing. "Anyone could notice. Not everyone cares enough to act on it." The room fell into comfortable silence as his classmates absorbed the truth of that statement. Izuku's gift wasn't just his enhanced senses or his culinary training. It was his fundamental belief that everyone deserved to be cared for, and his willingness to act on that belief even when it was inconvenient or difficult. "That's what makes you different from other heroes," Iri said quietly from her spot at the counter, where she was carefully arranging garnishes under Izuku's supervision. "You don't just save people from bad things, you help them feel good things." "Both are important," Izuku replied gently. "Sometimes people need rescuing and sometimes they need nurturing. The best heroes know when to do which." "Speaking of which," Iida announced, consulting his detailed schedule, "we should begin our final preparations. The festival begins in 3 days and we still need to complete our final menu testing." What followed was organized chaos as the entire class shifted into high gear. They had decided on an ambitious menu that showcased both traditional Japanese cuisine and international dishes, designed to appeal to the diverse crowd expected at the festival. But more than that, each dish had been chosen to tell a story about their class, their growth, and their understanding of what it meant to be heroes. The UA Cultural Festival dawned bright and clear, with excited voices and the smell of cooking food already filling the air across campus. Class 1A's restaurant, dubbed Heroes Table after much debate, had been set up in one of the larger common areas, with seating for 50 people and a kitchen space that buzzed with coordinated activity. "Places, everyone," Yaoyorozu called out, consulting her clipboard with the precision of a general commanding troops. "Cooking team to stations, service team ready for customers. Entertainment crew standing by." Izuku stood at the center of the kitchen, surrounded by his classmates who had become surprisingly competent sous chefs over the past few weeks. His enhanced senses were already picking up the scents and sounds of other festival activities, the excited chatter of visitors, the anticipation that filled the air. "Nervous?" Todoroki asked quietly, taking his position at the prep station. "Excited," Izuku corrected. "This is what we've been working toward, not just the festival, but everything. Showing people that heroes are about more than fighting." "Yeah," Bakugo added, tying his apron with more care than his usual explosive energy would suggest. "Let's show them what Class 1A can really do." The first customers began arriving as soon as they opened, drawn by the incredible aromas wafting from their kitchen. What started as a trickle quickly became a steady stream, then a flood as word spread about the quality of both the food and the service. "Welcome to Heroes Table," Achako greeted each group with genuine warmth. "We're so glad you're here, right this way. Table 12 needs the vegetarian ramen and 2 orders of the teriyaki chicken," Jiro called out from the service window. "Coming right up," Izuku replied, his hands moving with practiced precision as he coordinated multiple dishes simultaneously. Around him, his classmates worked with the seamless coordination they developed through months of training together. But this time, instead of fighting villains, they were creating experiences that brought joy to people's lives. "Midoriya," Mainta called out during a brief lull, "there's someone here who says he knows you." Izuku looked up from the stir-fry. He was preparing to see a familiar figure standing at the host station. Chef Sato, looking older than when Izuku had last seen him, but with the same warm smile that had welcomed a confused 4-year-old into his restaurant so many years ago. "Chef Sato?" Izuku's face lit up as he quickly finished the dish and handed it off to Sato, the student, for plating. "What are you doing here? Did you really think I'd miss seeing my student's big debut?" The older man replied, accepting a hug that carried years of gratitude and affection. "Though I have to say I'm impressed. This operation is more sophisticated than some professional restaurants I've seen." "That's because I had good teachers," Izuku said meaningfully, "and amazing teammates." Chef Sato looked around the bustling restaurant, taking in the sight of hero students who were clearly having the time of their lives serving food to delighted customers. "You know, when I first started teaching you, I thought I was training a future hero who happened to cook, but looking at this," he gestured to encompass the entire scene, "I think maybe I was training a chef who happens to save people. Is there a difference?" "Maybe not," Chef Sato smiled. "Maybe that's the point." As the afternoon wore on, Heroes Table became the unofficial center of the cultural festival. Other classes stopped by between their own activities, teachers found excuses to check on their progress, and even some professional heroes who were visiting the festival made their way to the increasingly famous Class 1A restaurant. "Midoriya," Present Mike's voice boomed across the dining room as he entered with Aizawa-sensei. "I heard you were putting on quite the show." "Just feeding people," Izuku replied with a grin, though he was clearly proud of what his class had accomplished. "Would you like to try our signature dish? It's a fusion ramen that represents how different flavors can come together to create something new. Symbolic and delicious. My favorite combination?" Even Aizawa-sensei seemed impressed, though he tried to hide it behind his usual stoic expression. "Your organizational skills have improved," he admitted as he observed the smooth operation. "This kind of coordination requires real leadership." "It's not just me," Izuku protested. "Everyone contributed their strengths. Yaoyorozu's planning, Iida's organization, Bakugo's quality control, Achako's people skills. This only works because we all work together." "Exactly the point," Aizawa replied. Real heroes understand that they're stronger as part of a team than they could ever be alone. As the day progressed, something special began to happen. The restaurant became more than just a place to eat. It became a gathering space where people from across the UA community came together. Students from other classes lingered to chat with Class 1A members, teachers shared stories about their own school days, and visitors found themselves staying longer than they'd planned, drawn by the atmosphere of warmth and genuine care. "You know what this reminds me of?" Iri said to Izuku during a quiet moment as she helped him prepare garnishes for the evening service. "It reminds me of what you said about families. Everyone here feels like they belong." "That's the secret ingredient," Izuku replied, watching his classmates work together with the easy familiarity of people who truly cared about each other. When you cook with love, when you serve with genuine care for others' happiness, people can taste it, they can feel it. Is that what being a hero really means, making people feel like they belong? Izuku paused in his prep work, considering her question with the seriousness it deserved. "I think it's one of the most important parts. Heroes protect people from danger, yes, but we also protect their right to be happy, to feel safe, to be part of something larger than themselves. And food does that. Food is one way to do it. But so is music, or art, or just listening when someone needs to talk. Heroes find whatever way they can to make people's lives better." As if to illustrate his point, the sound of laughter erupted from the dining room, where Kaminari was entertaining a table of elementary school children with small electrical light shows while they ate. Nearby, Kirishima was arm wrestling with some older students, his infectious enthusiasm spreading to everyone around him. This was heroism in its purest form, not dramatic battles or flashy rescues, but the simple act of making others feel valued and cared for. As the cultural festival wound down and the last customers departed, Class 1A gathered in their now quiet restaurant to share a meal together. The day had been exhausting but deeply satisfying. They had served over 300 people, received countless compliments, and more importantly, created an experience that brought joy to everyone who participated. "I can't believe how well that went," Yaoyorozu said, finally allowing herself to relax after hours of precise coordination. "We actually pulled it off." "We did more than pull it off," Iida declared, his usual formal demeanor softened by genuine pride. "We created something beautiful, something that showed the true spirit of heroism." "The true spirit of Class 1A anyway," Takami added with what might have been a smile. Izuku looked around at his classmates, tired, messy from a day of hard work, but glowing with the satisfaction of a job well done. This was what they had been building toward all year. Not just individual strength, but the ability to work together to create something greater than any of them could achieve alone. "You know," he said quietly, "when I first got to UA, I thought being a hero was about having the strongest quirk or winning the most battles. But today I realized that maybe the most heroic thing you can do is help other people discover how strong they already are." "Deep thoughts from our resident philosopher chef," Bakugo said, but there was no mockery in his tone. "Though you're not wrong, seeing some of these idiots actually pull together when it mattered, that was pretty heroic." "Thank you too, Kaken," Jiru said dryly, earning chuckles from around the table. "But seriously," Achako said, her expression thoughtful, "what Deku said is true. Today wasn't about any of us individually being heroes. It was about all of us together creating something heroic." "A symbol," Todoroki added quietly. "Not of peace exactly, but of community, of belonging." "The symbol of nourishment," Iri said suddenly, looking up from her bowl with bright eyes. "That's what Izuku is. Not just because he cooks, but because he helps people grow stronger and happier." The phrase hung in the air for a moment, resonating with a truth that went deeper than any official hero ranking or media designation. "I like that," Izuku said finally. "The symbol of nourishment, not someone who stands above others, but someone who helps others stand taller." Months later, as Class 1A prepared for their final exams at UA, the lessons of the cultural festival continued to resonate through everything they did. They had learned that true heroism wasn't just about individual strength or dramatic rescues. It was about building communities where everyone felt valued and cared for. Izuku stood in the dormitory kitchen preparing what had become a tradition, pre-exam comfort food for his entire class. But this time felt different. This wasn't just about helping his friends manage stress, it was about celebrating how far they had all come together. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Todoroki asked as he joined Izuku in the prep work, their partnership in the kitchen now as natural as their teamwork in battle. "Excited," Izuku replied, echoing his words from the festival. "We've grown so much, all of us, not just as individuals but as a team. Whatever challenges we face next, I know we can handle them together." "Together," Bakugo agreed, appearing in the doorway with Kirishima and several other classmates behind him. "That's the secret ingredient, right? The thing that makes everything else work." "One of them," Izuku confirmed. "Along with care, understanding, and the willingness to put others' needs before your own glory." As his classmates gathered in the kitchen, each contributing their own skills to the meal preparation, Izuku felt the familiar warmth in his chest that had guided him since childhood. This was what Chef Sato had been trying to teach him all those years ago. That the most powerful force in the world wasn't any quirk or technique, but the connections people formed when they chose to care for each other. "You know," Eri said from her usual spot at the counter where she was now skilled enough to handle garnish preparation on her own, "I think I understand what heroes really do now." "What's that?" Izuku asked. "They don't just save people from bad things," she said thoughtfully. "They create spaces where good things can grow, like this kitchen, like our restaurant, like families." "That's exactly right," Izuku agreed, his smile warm enough to light the entire room. "Heroes are gardeners in a way. We plant seeds of hope and kindness, and then we tend them carefully so they can grow into something beautiful." Outside the dormitory windows, the lights of Musutafu twinkled in the evening darkness, each one representing someone who deserved to feel safe and valued and cared for. Inside, a group of young heroes continued learning that their greatest power lay not in their individual quirks, but in their commitment to each other and to the communities they would someday protect. The cooking hero had found his true calling, not just as someone who could fight villains or rescue people from danger, but as someone who could create the conditions where heroism could flourish. He was the symbol of nourishment, the hero who understood that strength came from helping others discover their own power, and that the most important battles were won not with fire and fury, but with love and understanding, and the simple act of making sure everyone had a place at the table. As they sat down to share their meal together, Izuku looked around at the faces of his chosen family and felt a deep certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they had learned to face everything else. Together, with care, and with the understanding that true heroism was not about standing above others, but about helping others stand tall. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibility. And sometimes that was the most heroic thing of all. The courage to believe that tomorrow could be better than today, and the determination to help make it so, one shared meal at a time. There it is, Deku's journey from quirkless to symbol of nourishment, a hero who creates communities where heroism flourishes. What was your favorite moment? The white flames against muscular, the Stain philosophy battle. That epic cultural festival? Drop your thoughts below, subscribe for more insane crossovers, and tell me what wild combo you want next. Thanks for watching, peace out.